Chapter 2797. Before he came back, he had already asked his subordinates to spread the news. However, he did not expect that there would be such a special welcome ceremony today. He actually wanted to silence her before she returned to the Gu family. Naively, he thought that he could tamper with the Gu family's history. Interesting. Who was Luo Shengjia's subordinate? He could not remember. However, he could not think of anyone else who would have the guts to do such a thing except for the cabinet elders. A tattered red windbreaker was scattered on the ground. In the chaotic battle, Zhu Ke had been shot in the arm and was slightly injured. Cold footsteps approached. Time seemed to stop at this moment. She looked up in surprise and saw Gu Jinglian standing in front of her, raising his eyebrows slightly. You previously sought refuge with Luo Shengjia. Zhu Ke lowered her head and said bluntly, Yes, I am a disciple of Luo Shenghao. However, why did you choose me a few minutes ago? Why did you choose to betray Luo Shenghao? Gu Jinglian asked again, seemingly puzzled. Zhu Ke looked up and suddenly curled her lips. Because you are stronger than him. Oh. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows, his expression unperturbed. He suddenly sneered. According to my methods, once any branch of the family has the intention to betray, I should eliminate them completely to prevent future troubles. However, the topic changed and Gu Jinglian looked at her. However, I think you are quite pleasing to the eye. Zhu Ke immediately offered her loyalty. Young master, let me follow you. I am willing to be your loyal subordinate. Gu Jinglian was silent for a moment before he suddenly turned around and said, Tomorrow, you will be glad of your decision. Zhu Ke immediately stood up and looked at his back. Why? However, she heard him say, Because I will destroy all those who have disloyal thoughts to me. I hope you are loyal enough to me. Otherwise, even if you saved me, I will destroy you. Leave no room for negotiation. Otherwise, I will destroy you with my own hands. Leave no room for negotiation. Chu Ho abruptly opened her eyes, and her pupils violently contracted. When she saw the snow-white ceiling, she abruptly sat up on the bed. Her movements were too violent, and she accidentally broke free of the drip. There was a retention needle in her wrist. The needle fell off from the retention needle. Blood gushed up and splattered on the white bedsheet. It was very eye-catching. Chu Ho's breathing quickened. She closed her eyes and quickly realized that she had just had a long nightmare. She was suddenly awakened by the dream and had a splitting headache. It was as if her head was about to explode. In the dream, the memories that had been sealed away for 5 years rushed into her mind like a cocoon breaking out. Scenes flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. Gu Jinglian, the Gu family, Luo Shenghao. Interpol, Lu Yanwei. Vermilion bird. Chu Ho clutched his head, which seemed to have been torn apart by something. His eyes were bloodshot and ferocious. Vermilion bird? Vermilion bird. This name kept surging in her mind. Finally, it turned into a vivid image in her mind. The memories ran through her mind. Each scene was like a card being read, continuously transmitting data into her mind. Vermilion bird. This name used to be her code name. She used to be a special agent. Later, she was hired by Interpol and officially became a member of the intelligence division of Interpol's anti-mafia team. Her code name was Vermilion Bird. Chapter 2798. Within 3 years, due to her outstanding achievements, she was promoted and officially appointed as the highest-ranking anti-crime inspector. Vermilion Bird was just a code name. However, in the FBI's records, there were 2 people with the code name Vermilion Bird. One was the senior officer of the Hurricane Group, Vermilion Bird. The other was her, Interpol's anti-crime inspector, Vermilion Bird. In order to distinguish the 2 Vermilion Birds, she was also known as White Bird, while the one from the Hurricane Group was known as Black Bird. Although the 2 of them had never met before, they were often compared. After all, they were both Vermilion Birds. Although one was an anti-crime inspector and the other was a top mercenary in the military, their abilities were on par. If they had the chance to meet, they would definitely be strong opponents. The sound of Chu Ho waking up woke up Meng Qingxue, who was lying next to him. She didn't know when she had fallen asleep. Perhaps she was tired from watching over Chu Ho, so she fell asleep without anyone noticing. She raised her head abruptly and saw that Chu Ho had woken up. She was so shocked that she stood up immediately. Chu-ho, you're awake. Meng Qingxue was extremely shocked. She remembered the doctor saying that with Chu-ho's physical condition, no matter how good his physical fitness was, because the wound was on his head, it would inevitably damage his vitality. Therefore, he wouldn't be able to wake up for a while. The blood clot was drained and the hematoma was crushed. However, there was still a small part of the hematoma that needed time to dissipate. She asked how long it would take for him to wake up. The doctor said that it would take at least one night. However, it was only 7 o'clock in the evening and he was already awake. Meng Qingxue was scared out of her wits by her sturdy physique. How do you feel? She asked anxiously. Chu-ho held his heavy head and asked himself, why am I in the hospital? Have you forgotten what happened before? When Chu-ho heard this, he couldn't help but recall what had happened before he fainted. The police station Xiaobaochu. It seemed that he had not slept well for several days and nights. Coupled with excessive anxiety, he had actually fainted. However, when he woke up, he felt that his body had undergone an earth-shaking change. For example, the side of his head was unbelievably painful. However, she was used to enduring pain. No matter how painful it was, she would not make a sound. When she was in the training base, her pain tolerance was extremely high. The doctor said that her reaction to pain was naturally indifferent. No matter how painful it was to her, it was only about 1/3 of a normal person's pain. Even so, the pain in his head was still unimaginable. The effects of the anesthetic had just worn off. Usually, at this time, patients who had also undergone this kind of surgery would not be able to fully wake up. Even if they woke up, they would go crazy because of the pain of the wound. They would even rely heavily on painkillers and tranquilizers. She couldn't help but reach out to touch it, but her fingertips touched a thick layer of gauze. What exactly happened to her? What had happened to her body while she was unconscious? Don't move. Chapter 2799. Chu-ho was stunned. She slowly put her hand down and frowned. Do you have a mirror? Her voice was colder than she remembered. Meng Qingxue couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She didn't know why, but compared to the Chu-ho in her memory, this person in front of her seemed a little unfamiliar. She was cold and her gaze was deep. She was like the dark queen of the night. Chu-ho had never spoken to her in such a cold tone. She didn't know if it was because of the surgery, but Chu-ho's temperament had changed drastically. Meng Qingxue hurriedly brought her a mirror. Chu-ho picked up the mirror and looked at herself. She realized that the right side of her head was covered with a thick layer of gauze. Her complexion didn't look good, especially her lips, which seemed to be covered with a thick layer of rouge. Meng Qingxue didn't know how she was recovering, so she asked in a roundabout way. The doctor said that after you recover from the surgery, you might not be able to regain your memory immediately. However, if you recover well, your memory will definitely be fully recovered. Chu-ho interrupted her abruptly and asked slowly, how long will it take for me to fully recover? Meng Qingxue looked confused. She didn't know how much she would recover when she said, fully recover. The doctor didn't say when I can be discharged? At least after the stitches are removed. The doctor said that the stitches can be removed in a week. As long as you remove them properly, you should recover faster than a normal person. Chu-ho heard this and nodded. However, to her surprise, right after Meng Qingxue said that the stitches could only be removed in a week, Chu-ho obediently lay back on the bed and closed his eyes. His sleeping posture was ramrod straight, and he actually had the posture of a soldier. This was something that Meng Qingxue had never seen on Chu-ho before. Chu-ho's attitude towards her was so unfamiliar. Could it be that he had already forgotten who she was? Just as Meng Qingxue was letting her imagination run wild, Chu-ho suddenly opened his eyes and said in a low voice, Qingxue. Yes. When Meng Qingxue heard her call her name, she immediately went up to her excitedly and asked softly, I'm here, Chu-ho. What do you want to say? Earlier, she was still wondering if Chu-ho would forget about her because he remembered the past after the surgery. The doctor said that during the recovery period after the operation, because the blood clot disappeared all of a sudden, the blood vessels and cranial nerves were no longer under pressure. Gradually, the lost memories would be regained. However, some of these patients were lucky enough to remember what happened before, but they forgot what happened later. That's great. Chu-ho still remembered her. Chu-ho, Is there anything you want to say to me, or ask me? As soon as Meng Qingxue finished speaking, Chuho said calmly, I've remembered everything. Meng Qingshue's expression suddenly froze. So fast? The doctor said that you might not be able to recover your memory immediately after the operation. Your body is also. Qingxue. Chuho said calmly. I remember who that man is. That man? For a moment Meng Qingxue did not realize who she was referring to. Chuho said, Xiao Bao's biological father. Meng Qingxue stared at her dumbfounded. You finally remember? Chapter 2800. Although his tone was calm and indifferent, the humiliation and hatred in his words were unforgettable. Meng Qingxue trembled in fear. Do you still remember that man's name? Chuho's chest heaved heavily. Suddenly, his thin lips opened slightly and a name escaped his mouth. Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian? In the CEO's office of Shengyu Financial Group, Mu Yaja sized up Lu Jinyu, who was standing in front of him in surprise. Lu Jinyu nodded and said, Yes. I heard that some time ago he washed the dragon sect with blood. In one night, the dragon sect suffered heavy casualties. Longxi was furious. In order to take revenge, he led his men to the biggest casino under the Gu family. In the end they were all wiped out. Longxi was left alive, but he was brought back to the Gu family. At this moment, I'm afraid he's being tortured by Gu Jinglian to the point where he's better off dead. Mu Yaja's lips twitched and he suddenly commented, No matter how depressed he is, he can't provoke that devil. Lu Jinyu silently cursed in his heart. Boss, you still have the cheek to say that. Compared to a devil like Gu Jinglian, a super masochist like you isn't much better. Both of them were equally ruthless. Offending either one would not end well. However, in comparison, sometimes Boss's methods were more humane. After all, he was already a father. At this moment in Lu Jinyu's eyes, Mu Yaja was sitting at his desk, full of the glow of fatherly love. Ah, was this the warm halo of fatherly love? Mu Yaja suddenly felt disgusted by the way Lu Jinyu was sizing him up. Don't look at me like that. It makes me want to vomit. Mu Yaja's sharp tongue was still as sharp as ever. Lu Jinyu suddenly thought of something and said, I heard that for some reason, Gu Jinglian has a 5-year-old child by his side. Child? Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows but did not look up at him. Instead, he continued to flip through the financial reports and said indifferently, He has a lot of women around him. It's not strange for him to have a child. Gu Jinglian doesn't believe in marriage. He's also very indifferent towards children. However, the informant I planted in the casino reported that Gu Jinglian dotes on the child very much. It seems like he loves the child very much. Oh. Mu Yaja was indifferent to this. Whether or not Gu Jinglian had children did not seem to have anything to do with him. Lu Jinyu, on the other hand, was engrossed in his story. Boss say blood ties are really mysterious. You see, a man like Gu Jinglian is ruthless and has a wide range of experience in various fields. He's such an outstanding man, but his son is the kind that would cry out loud when he sees blood. Mu Yaja's expression remained calm. He only felt that Lu Jinyu was a very gossipy and talkative man sometimes. Lu Jinyu said with a smile, This little guy might be the future successor of the Gu family. If that's the case, then this child will be a match for the two young masters in the future. Mu Yaja remained silent. Lu Jinyu asked curiously, Boss, have you thought about who will inherit the Shengyu Financial Group in the future? Mu Yaja glanced at him sideways. What do you think? Chapter 2801. It was obvious that he did not want to offend either side. It was a high-sounding excuse. Mu Yaja looked at him with disdain. Speak frankly. You don't have to be so reserved. I don't believe anything you say. If you really want to express an opinion, I think Yu is more outstanding. Just like Boss, he has an innate business mind and is very talented. If Shengyu Financial Group is handed over to him, you can also live out your remaining years in peace. Mu Yaja was speechless. Live out my remaining years in peace? Was he old? Was he that old? Lu Jinyu saw that his expression was not right. When he thought of how he had blurted out, live out my remaining years in peace, he looked guilty. Boss, pay attention to the main point. The main point is that Yu is very capable. If he inherits Shengyu Financial Group in the future, it will definitely grow stronger. I think so too. Mu Yaja casually placed the financial report on the table, stood up slowly, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The headquarters of Xingyu Financial Group was located in a skyscraper on the bustling financial street. The CEO's office was located on the highest floor. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, one could see the entire city's bustling high-rise buildings at a glance. Lu Jinyu walked to his side and silently compared the two children in his heart. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder. Sometimes genes are really a magical thing. Xiaoichen is far more talented in military affairs than Boss. Yu Yu, on the other hand, was even more talented in business. In this way, the two little guys have each inherited some of Boss's strengths. One is civil and the other is military. It's really amazing. I'm so envious. Mu Yaja said coldly, if you're envious, find a woman and give birth to a child for yourself. Boss, do you think I'm annoying? Have you taken the wrong medicine these 2 days? Mu Yaja raised one hand and pointed at the clock on his wrist with the other. He said coldly, you've been talking non-stop since an hour ago when you came in and handed me the financial report. I'm already being merciful by not kicking you out. Boss, this is too much. As a loner, I can only watch you and sister-in-law being lovey-dovey all day long. What's even more infuriating is that you have 2 smart sons. I can't even envy you, but I can't even complain a little. It's not like there are no women chasing after you. That's true, but Lu Jinyu complained. For the past 2 months, I've been either attending meetings or working overtime. Boss, tell me, how can I find time to date when I've been so busy? You're so busy every day that you don't even have time for a date. He didn't even have time for a date? It was time for a one-night stand. This man rarely had a serious relationship. Perhaps it was because he lacked the patience to deal with women. To him, women were a species that he would only think of when he was lonely. However, he could already tell that Lu Jinyu had only one motive for complaining and nagging so much. Protesting against overtime. He snorted. Continue. Chapter 2802. But boss, don't you think that I've been working too much overtime recently? I worked for 13 hours yesterday, and I went back and read my emails for more than an hour. With such a high intensity of work, I feel like my body is about to be hollowed out by you. If this goes on, I'm going to be crushed. You're hollowed out by a woman, aren't you? Mu Yaja glared at him. Some time ago, Jiang Shan said that he saw Lu Jinyu coming out of a hotel with a hot woman in his arms. He looked energetic and didn't look like he was exhausted at all. Go on. So boss, do you think you can reduce the amount of overtime I have? Otherwise, I'll be all alone and have to watch you and sister-in-law show off your grace every day and work overtime. It's really not a good life. Lu Jinyu complained in a tearful voice. Mu Yaja glanced at him and suddenly asked, then have you saved enough money to get married? The corners of Lu Jinyu's lips twitched. No. Then President Mu gave an important instruction. If you don't, then work hard. 3 minutes later, Lu Jinyu walked out of the office dejectedly. Mu Yaja finally sent the devil away. However, he kept thinking about what Lu Jinyu said just now. Who should he hand over the future Xingyu Financial Group to? Lu Jinyu's words were true. Yu Yu's talent in the business field was more outstanding than his. He was even more outstanding than his master. His extraordinary talent was dazzling. If he inherited the Xingyu Financial Group, it would be the best choice. However, he couldn't unilaterally decide Yu Yu's future. In other words, Yu Yu's future should be in his own hands. If he said that again, he would not force his will on the child. Even if he became a teacher, a soldier, an artist, or even a scientist in the future, he wouldn't force him to do anything. Because he loved him. He loved these 2 little guys. Although he was usually not good with words, his fatherly love was deep. He was never good at expressing his love for the 2 little guys. Instead, he silently protected them and accompanied them. At 4 o'clock, Mu Yaja walked out of his office. Outside his office were Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shan's offices. He left under their resentful gazes. Jiang Shan said enviously, "You're going to pick up sister-in-law from work so early." After Mu Yaja walked away, Lu Jinyu ran his fingers through his hair and lamented. Working overtime is so painful. What's more painful is that I don't have a wife. I'm going crazy. Boss, your aggro is extraordinary. Zhang Shan's eyes were red as he bit down on the pen cap. Lu Jinyu gritted his teeth and said, "What was even more infuriating was that one day, I asked him why he could get off work so early while we had to work overtime." "Oh." Zhang Shan was rather surprised. "When did you say that?" "During the staff meeting. In front of all the employees." Xingyu Financial Group's corporate culture. First of all, the system of equal status between the company's top management and its employees attracted countless elites. Lu Jinyu said, "In order to convince all the employees, I specially checked boss's clock-in record. Which one of them didn't leave the company at 4 in the afternoon? Because he had to pick up his wife," Jiang Shen said. Chapter 2803. Boss wasn't angry either. "You exposed him in front of so many people, but he didn't deduct your bonus." "Humph." Lu Jinyu sneered and said, "I questioned him. Why is he allowed to leave work 4 hours in advance? Guess what he said in the end?" "Tell me about it." Jiang Shan rested his chin on one hand. Lu Jinyu adjusted his collar and imitated Muyaja's unfathomable expression. He said coldly, "I start work at 10 p.m. and leave at 6 p.m. However, I'm used to planning my working hours. Generally speaking, I can finish my work before 3 p.m., have a cup of afternoon tea, and then leave the office. Comrade Jinyu, what about you? Starting work at 10 p.m. and taking a 1-hour lunch break? How could he finish such a heavy workload in 5 hours? Most importantly, he could always spare an hour for afternoon tea." Jiang Shen slammed the report on the table. "Boss is a pervert." Muyaja drove out of the office. The reason why he finished work at 4 p.m. and left the office early was to avoid the busy traffic. At 6 p.m., the rush hour after work, the roads would be congested. He would usually arrive at the set at 4:30 p.m., then pick up Yun Shishir and leave the set. Based on his driving speed, he would usually be home before 6 p.m. Yun Shishir's scenes were also required to be shot before 4 p.m. However, on this day, Yun Shishir's scenes were filmed until very late. By the time he arrived, she was still filming. Muyaja entered the set and walked to the filming location. The filming location had changed to Wuling Mountain. Because extreme youth mainly revolved around car racing, racing on the mountain roads was also an important part of the story. The scenes were all filmed together on the same set. Yun Shishir filmed the racing scenes for several days. Although she didn't complete some of the particularly dangerous scenes herself, she still completed most of the scenes herself. Gu Xing's evaluation of her was that her driving skills were difficult to explain in a few words. Yun Shishir suffered a big blow. After a day of racing on the mountain roads, she still had to experience Muyaja's speed and passion on the way home. Every time she returned home, she would sit at the dining table with a livid face. She was already dizzy, and when she saw the greasy food, she wanted to vomit. Muyaja's driving skills were amazing. It was a pity that this man didn't become a professional driver. When Muyaja arrived at the set, everyone there retreated in shock when they saw him. Ever since Yun Shishir and him went public with their relationship, everyone knew his identity. The former overlord of the Mu Financial Group and the current founder of Xingyu Financial Group, and Yun Shishir's fiancé. It was just that this man was definitely a gentle gentleman in front of her in front of the screen. However, in private, a crew member once mustered up the courage to go up and say hello. Muyaja suddenly scanned her with a cold light and almost froze her into ice. It was too scary. There was always a sense of keep people away from him. Chapter 2804. When Mushi saw him, she immediately went up to him enthusiastically. "Chairman Mu, you're early today. However, Shishir's scenes aren't done yet. She had a few NGs midway, and the filming wasn't ideal. The director had no choice but to cut the scenes and reshoot." "Ing." "Yes. I don't know why. Maybe it's because she's not in good condition. Coupled with the steep mountain roads, even though she took precautions, it was still difficult for her to film the entire day. Maybe she got carsick. Shishir vomited a few times and wasted a lot of time." "Vomited?" Muyaja furrowed his brows. He remembered that she did not get carsick. Unless she was in a racer's car. However, if she was driving and recording, many of them would use special effects. They only needed to capture a few moving shots and render them. How could she get carsick at such a slow speed? Muyaja could not help but wonder if she vomited because she was not feeling well. It's okay. I'll wait for her. Muyaja did not think too much about it. He sat down on a chair at the side. Mushi stood helplessly at the side and could not help feeling a little uneasy. She knew very well that with her relationship with Shirshir, there was no need for her to be so fearful and respectful toward Muyaja. However, for some reason when facing this man, the servility in her bones involuntarily came out. Mushi carefully walked to the side and sized up Muyaja. She asked tentatively, "Chairman Mu, are you hot? Are you thirsty? Do you want me to get you a glass of water?" "No need." He had come over after afternoon tea, so he was not thirsty now. Muyaja looked at her again and suddenly snorted. "You don't have to be so nervous." Mushi said nervously. "I don't know why, but I feel nervous when I see Chairman Mu." Muyaja touched his face and muttered suspiciously, "Could it be that I look too fierce?" No. She hurriedly waved her hands and said uneasily, "Mr. Mu is very kind and approachable when he smiles. He's also very kind to me, but..." The corner of Muyaja's mouth twitched. He was speechless. Why did it sound like he was some kind of national leader from her mouth? Muyaja was speechless. "Just sit there quietly." "All right." Upon hearing this, Mushi immediately sat down at the side. Sitting upright and still, she resembled an obedient student who had just started primary school. It made one feel cold. Half an hour later, Yoon Shirshir's scenes finally ended. The director finally gave his approval. Although this scene was not satisfactory, if they continued to shoot like this, her condition would not improve. It was better to wait until she was in a better condition before reshooting. Anyway, she was about to finish filming her scenes, so she didn't have to rush. After filming, the director walked over to her and asked, "Shirshir, you've been acting a little strange recently. Are you feeling unwell?" Yoon Shirshir frowned and shook her head helplessly. "Maybe it's because I've been too busy with the scripts for the past few days. It's too tiring." Chapter 2805. Among the younger generation of actors, there aren't many who are as serious and hardworking as Yuangu Xingza. I think that as long as you persevere, you will definitely be able to stand at the top. "Thank you for your guidance, director," Yoon Shirshir said gratefully. In fact, she had not accepted many reality show scripts recently. As for the reality shows that she had agreed to participate in, it was not because of the remuneration offered by the production team, but because those reality shows were sponsored by the products she endorsed. Therefore, in order to promote, she signed a contract to join the reality show. Since the last public confrontation with Ji Yen and the unintentional exposure of her relationship with Muyaja, many production teams had extended an olive branch to her and invited her to do a show with Muyaja. Muyaja did not like to be exposed to the public and had an obvious resistance to the camera. However, for some reason, whenever the production team sent an invitation, he would usually read the script carefully. If the script did not cross his bottom line too much, he would ask for her opinion. If she did not have any objections, he would decide to accept the script. However, the price he quoted was also very high. 10 million per episode. This was definitely not raising the price. His time was very precious. In addition, his popularity had recently far surpassed the big stars in the entertainment industry. Even popular actresses and A-list actors did not have as much traffic as him. Traffic referred to the exposure rate of a public figure. The higher the exposure rate, the higher the popularity. In addition, as long as he appeared on the show, the production team would take the list to the investors for bidding. Generally, during the time slot where he appeared on the show, a 1-minute commercial could be sold for millions of yuan per second. In other words, the TV station could earn 60 million yuan per minute by airing 4 commercials in turns. This did not include the viewership ratings. Yoon Shirshir found that as long as Muyaja appeared on the show, the viewership ratings would definitely be able to secure the top spot. However, whenever she recorded a show alone, the viewership ratings would always be somewhat unsatisfactory. Therefore, it was not unreasonable for him to ask for a reward of 10 million. Yoon Shirshir's reward was much less than his, only 1 million per episode. She could not help but complain to Qin Zhou, but Qin Zhou said matter-of-factly, "Do you think the audience wants to see you?" Actually, what the audience really wants to see is the handsome and rich real-life version of the domineering CEO. It just so happens that Chairman Mu satisfies all the audience's fantasies about this character. It's not surprising that he's more popular than you. After all, there are very few men like Chairman Mu in this world. Sure. You're saying that you're unlucky to have found a man like Chairman Mu. You must have saved the galaxy in your previous life. Yoon Shursher's lips twitched. Are you praising him and stepping on me? No, this is the truth. Why don't we just let him debut? Yoon Shursher huffed. A man like him can make a living with his looks in the entertainment industry. Are you sure? Chapter 2806. Yoon Shursher shuddered in fear. He won't cheat. Yoon Shursher clenched her fists and said, He's not a playboy. I'm not trying to scare you. Looks like you don't understand men. Chinzhou continued to boast. No matter how strong a man is, there's a saying that men think with their lower body. It's not without basis. No matter how strong Seo Mu's mental fortitude is, he can't defend himself against all those sluts out there. Yoon Shursher swallowed hard. After Yoon Shursher finished filming, she bade farewell to the crew. When she was leaving the set, she saw Muyaja sitting quietly on a chair, waiting for her in the resting area. She took a look at the chair he was sitting on. It was so shabby. However, just by sitting there, he gave off an air of nobility that couldn't be profaned. This was the first time she had seen someone who could make a chair that cost a few dollars look like a Taisher chair. When Muyaja saw her, he stood up and walked up to her. You're done filming? Yeah, you're so early today. Early? Muyaja lifted his hand to look at his watch and pointed at the hands. Madam, it's late. You're the one who finished filming late today. Yoon Shursher took a look at the time. It's so late? Muyaja raised his eyebrows. Why are you so late? I heard from your assistant that you haven't been feeling well these few days. Are you feeling unwell? I'm not feeling unwell, Yoon Shursher complained. It's mainly because there are a few scenes that need to be filmed on cliffs. I thought I wasn't afraid of heights, but I had to drive through a very steep mountain road. When I looked to the right, there was a bottomless abyss. When I saw the cliff, I couldn't help but let my imagination run wild. I thought that if I didn't control the car properly and it flew out, I would definitely fall to pieces. When I thought of this, I got quite a shock. I reckon that I was so frightened that my vitality was damaged. There was such a saying? Could a person's vitality be damaged when they were frightened? Muyaja said. Your body is really disappointing. Hey, can't I be timid? Yoon Shursher felt wronged. It's fine if you don't comfort me, but you're being sarcastic. It was dangerous to begin with. If we're not careful, the car might lose control and fly out. That's a cliff that's more than 1,000 meters high. I never realized that you were such a coward. Muyaja rubbed her hair lovingly and said, But you deserve it. I didn't force you to take on such a dangerous script. When he first accepted this script, a certain someone was very ambitious. This has nothing to do with courage. If it were you, you would be so scared that your legs would go soft too. Muyaja suddenly smiled. I forgot to tell you. When I was young, I ran a mountain race here. Yoon Shursher choked on her words and asked quizzically, A mountain race? Yes. Mountain race is mainly about drifting and drifting. When were you young? 17 years old. Yoon Shursher was shocked. You took part in underground racing when you were 17 years old? Muyaja pinched her face. It's a proper world-class race. All the top racers took part. So did you get a place? Muyaja shook his head. No. Why? Chapter 2807. I can't guarantee that I'll be the champion, but if the competition goes on as per normal, it won't be a problem for me to get into the top 3. As per normal? Yeah. Because there was an accident because this mountain road is very steep. I remember that during the finals an American racer lost control of his drifting and crashed off the cliff. The competition was stopped because of that. Yoon Shursher was dumbfounded by what she heard. Muyaja continued, because this mountain road has been evaluated, it's too steep, and there's also the danger of rolling rocks. If there's a rainstorm, it's easy to collapse. So, the Racing Association closed this route. After a pause, he suddenly thought of something and leaned closer to her with a sinister expression. He whispered in her ear, I heard that this mountain road has been haunted before. Some underground racers secretly went to the mountain road to have a drifting competition. In the end, when one of them drove to the spot of the accident, his brakes mysteriously stopped working. At the same spot, he and his car crashed off the cliff and crashed at the place where the American racer died. Yoon Shurshur was shocked. Haunted? Yeah. Muyaja deliberately lowered his voice and said, "Why do you think I insist on picking you up after filming every day? It's because I'm worried about you. This is a place where energy gathers. More than 10 years ago, before the winding mountain road was built, many expedition teams came here to climb the rocks and mountains. Countless of them fell to their deaths. I still remember that when the rescue team went down the mountain to rescue them, they found many skeletons." Yoon Shurshur sucked in a breath of cold air. Suddenly, someone patted her shoulder gently from behind. Yoon Shurshur was already immersed in these bizarre and absurd stories. When she was patted, she instantly shrieked in fright. Hua Jin, who was behind her, was so frightened that he retracted his hand. When she saw that it was Hua Jin, Yoon Shurshur patted her chest and cried, "Hua Jin, why did you scare me on purpose?" "I'm innocent," Hua Jin said innocently. "I just wanted to talk to you and patted your shoulder. Who knew you would be so scared?" Yoon Shurshur was still in a state of shock. She glanced at Muyaja and suddenly pulled Hua Jin to the side mysteriously. "Hua Jin, did you know? The Wuling Mountain is haunted." "Haunted?" Hua Jin's face darkened. Why hadn't he heard of it? Yoon Shurshur felt her scalp go numb. When she thought of what Muyaja had said to her just now, she still had a lingering fear in her heart. Thus, she recounted the ghost story to him. Suddenly, she looked like she was about to cry. "It's so scary, isn't it? If I had known that this place was haunted and cursed, I wouldn't have accepted this script." Hua Jin was speechless. "This kind of ghost story I've heard countless versions when I was young, okay? You're obviously just making things up. What haunted? It's more like a lie to a child. How could you believe it?" Yoon Shurshur was speechless. Chapter 2808. Yoon Shurshur's heart shattered into glass shards. She gritted her teeth and turned around to glare at Muyaja, only to see the evil smile on his face. If it weren't for the fact that there were other people around, he would have laughed at her without any grace. "You!" Yoon Shurshur glared at him angrily. "Why did you make up a ghost story to scare people? I thought that you wouldn't believe such a low-grade story. I didn't expect you to be so innocent." Muyaja sneered at her. Yoon Shurshur clenched her fists in anger. So angry. She was actually tricked. So it was a story made up by brother-in-law. Hua Jin finally understood and laughed. "Oh my god. Shurshur, you're too stupid. You actually believe such nonsense." "Ah. Shut up. You're not allowed to laugh anymore." Yoon Shurshur looked like she had nothing left to live for. At the side, the staff sitting in the resting area were also amused by the interaction between the three of them. This couple was too loving. Some time ago, Yoon Shurshur's fans gave them a couple name. Estee Lauder. When Yoon Shurshur saw this couple name, she snickered. If this couple name became famous, would Estee Lauder look for her to endorse their products? She didn't expect that not long after, Estee Lauder really looked for her to endorse their products. Yoon Shurshur's expression at that time could be said to be in a mess. After bidding farewell to the crew, Yoon Shurshur and Hua Jin walked behind while chatting and laughing. Muyaja was responsible for driving the car over. "Shurshur, you're so happy now," Hua Jin said enviously. "If only I could find a man who loves me so much." His words were so fast that they were shocking. Yoon Shurshur quivered. "A man? No, no." Hua Jin hurriedly waved his hand and said in embarrassment, "I was wrong. It's a woman. It's a woman." Yoon Shurshur continued to look at him with a very deep gaze. Hua Jin immediately raised his hand and swore, "I swear, my sexual orientation is absolutely normal." Hua Jin. Yoon Shurshur said seriously, "Actually, it's not shameful to like men." He wanted to cry but had no tears. "I really don't like men. I'm the #1 straight man in the universe." Yoon Shurshur smiled. "Hua Yuji." Scram. Hua Jin stopped mid-sentence and looked at Muyaja's back. He suddenly smiled and said, "Brother-in-law looks like a dutiful coachman." "Who?" Yoon Shurshur hurriedly covered his mouth. "If he hears you, he'll ban you." Muyaja could vaguely hear the discussion behind him. but he saw Hua Jin's cautious look. He raised his eyebrows but did not ask much. He turned around and got into the car, driving out of the parking lot. Hua Jin followed her car back to the apartment as usual. Although he bought a second-hand car, he did not know why, probably because he was unlucky he bought an accident car. A few years ago, there was a rainstorm in the capital and half of the city was flooded. Many cars were soaked in water and became water bubble cars. The mechanic who repaired his car said that it was probably because he bought a water bubble car. That was why the engine was soaked in water and needed to be replaced. Hua Jin was frowning for a few days because of this. Yun Shishir said that she wanted to lend him money to buy a new car. Hua Jin, on the other hand, said that he wanted to rely on himself and use his salary to buy a new car. Chapter 2809. Is this considered cozying up to someone powerful? Yes. Yun Shishir gave a fair evaluation. Hua Jin sighed. What goes around comes around. In the past, there were many young actresses lining up to cozy up to me. Now it's your turn to be down and out. After a pause, Yun Shishir continued. Do you want fashion resources? Hua Jin shook his head. No way. A male celebrity needs to rely on fashion resources to maintain his exposure. Isn't that too sad? Speaking of which, I remember now. Yun Shishir snapped her fingers. Some time ago, a reality show invited me to be a permanent guest. However, I have some issues with my schedule. Plus, reality shows are very tiring and I can't handle it. I can recommend you. Reality show. Hua Jin considered for a moment and nodded. That's fine too. Do you have a sense of variety? Yes, I do. The company has specialized training. Hua Jin suddenly said. Don't think that I have the burden of being an idol. When I film a variety show, my sense of variety is quite strong. What burden of being an idol do you have? Yun Shishir looked at him in disdain. If your exposure doesn't increase, I feel that you're going to be outdated. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Her poisonous tongue was like 1,000 arrows piercing through his heart. Hua Jin clutched his chest, his heart aching. Am I really going to become an outdated idol? Aha. Hua Jin suddenly thought of something. He pulled her hand and said coquettishly, Shishir, why don't we create a couple? What? Yun Shishir was confused. A couple like the lucky couple. Yun Shishir thought that she had heard wrongly. She was speechless. Are you kidding? How can I create a couple with you now? I've already made my relationship with your brother-in-law public. Hey, publicizing our relationship can hype up cheating. Hua Jin deliberately teased her. Before Yun Shishir could reply to him, the car suddenly braked. Hua Jin was caught off guard, and his body flew forward. He quickly held onto the seat to steady himself. Mu Yaja, who was sitting in the driver's seat, suddenly turned his head with a cold expression. He cast a sidelong glance at him, his eyes unfathomable. Hype a couple. The man's voice suddenly became extremely deep. Hua Jin looked at him, cold sweat trickling down his back. Mu Yaja suddenly pinched his face and retorted calmly. Look, why don't you and I become a couple? Hua Jin trembled in fear. This man didn't look like he was going to be a couple with him. He clearly looked like he wanted to eat him alive. Brother-in-law, I was joking. Hua Jin hurriedly explained. He was almost scared to tears by his gloomy expression. Ha ha ha. Yun Shishir was tickled by the interaction between the two. Hua Jin, are you tired of living? You know that your brother-in-law can't take this kind of joke, yet you still said it so loudly in front of him. You're clearly asking for a beating. Hua Jin was so frightened that he clasped his hands together and begged Mu Yaja for mercy. Brother-in-law, I was wrong. With that said, he stared at him innocently with a pair of starry eyes, like a child who had made a mistake. Mu Yaja pushed him back into the back seat and suddenly smiled. If you want resources, I have them. Oh. Do you know about the production team of a male pursuing a female phoenix? Hua Jin nodded. I know. Chapter 2810. Wasn't a male phoenix seeking a female phoenix the production team that had just started financing? It was said to be a gold medal team with a top-notch scriptwriter and director. In 3 days, report to the temporary production team at Huanyu Tower. Hua Jin was dumbfounded. Had he managed to latch onto someone powerful? He had originally thought that this brother-in-law of his would be difficult to talk to. However, with just one sentence, he was able to get him to report to the production team. This was too scary. There was a feeling that even if he casually plucked a hair from him, it would be as thick as his waist. Hua Jin was a little excited, his eyes sparkling. He had never dared to think of latching onto Mu Yaja's thigh. Even more so, he had never thought that it would be so easy to latch onto Mu Yaja's thigh. It was said that A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix was a show that relied on connections. By connections, it meant that the actors were all brought into the production team with funding. A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix was a very famous palace drama. Once the news of the production started, the financing reached as high as 300 million. This showed that the reputation and influence of the original work of A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix was unquestionable. Nowadays, most television dramas were developed using copyrights and IP adaptations. Because novels had a huge market, this greatly reduced the risk of the investors. Therefore, there was no news of an audition during the casting process. There were even rumors that this drama series was tailor-made for a certain actress by a certain investor. Hua Jin had only heard about it through the grapevine. He did not know which of Huan Yu's higher-ups had specially invested in setting up an opera troupe to support a certain actress. The male star had also been chosen long before the financing started. Is it the second male lead? You call me brother-in-law. Can I let you play a role other than the main lead? Mu Yaja asked faintly. Hua Jin was so touched that his eyes were brimming with tears. He suddenly hugged Mu Yaja's arm tightly and said coquettishly, Oh, brother-in-law, can you provide for me? I can warm your bed. I'm sensible and obedient. I can be your confidant. Yun Shirshir was so amused that she let out a pft sound. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mu Yaja's face turned green. Resisting the urge to vomit, he forcibly freed his arm from Zhao Yu's grip and said expressionlessly, Get lost. Don't touch me. Yun Shirshir was once again amused by Mu Yaja's reaction. Hua Jin, stop messing around with your brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law's thigh isn't something that just anyone can latch onto. I can support you but forget about keeping you as a mistress. Haha. Yun Shirshir held back her laughter and said seriously, Besides, your brother-in-law doesn't need anyone to warm his bed. He has me, Yu and Xiaoi Chen. Speaking of warming the bed, Xiaoi Chen had made a big joke of himself last time. At that time he learned the 3-character classic in the textbook. One of them was, when Xiang is 9 years old, she can warm the banquet. Because it had a very heartwarming allusion, the teacher especially emphasized this line. In ancient times there was a person named Huang Xiang. His family was poor, and his mother passed away when he was 9 years old. He became even more filial and cherished his father. In winter the weather was cold and there was no heating at home. Thus, Huang Xiang was worried that his father would catch a cold. So he ran to his father's room and slept on his bed, using his own body temperature to warm himself up. In summer, the house was especially hot and stuffy. There were many mosquitoes and flies, so Huang Xiang used a cattail leaf fan to fan the mosquitoes away. Chapter 28:11. When Xiaoi Chen heard this story, he was extremely touched. Hence, one day when Mu Yaja returned home, the weather was still very cold. When he walked into the bedroom and saw a small bump on the bed, he thought that Yu had crawled under his blanket to play a prank. Hence he walked over and lifted the bump. However, he saw Mu Chen in his fluffy pajamas. He was curled up under the blanket, but he was shivering from the cold. Xiaoi Chen muttered in his heart, Why is this bed so cold? He had been under the blanket for so long, but it still felt cold. When Mu Yaja lifted the cup, Xiaoi Chen was shocked. Mu Yaja was even more shocked by his strange posture. What are you doing? The man asked. When Xiaoi Chen heard this, a shy expression immediately appeared on his face. He explained softly, Daddy, the blanket is cold. I'm warming it up for you. You've been working all day and it's been so tiring. I'll warm the blanket for you so that you won't feel cold when you get in. After he finished speaking, he fell into a state of self-satisfaction. He only hoped that Mu Yaja would be touched. However, he suddenly heard Mu Yaja's voice, which was colder than the blanket, say, Why didn't you freeze to death? Then he reached out to switch on the central air conditioner and tugged at his tie. Get out. At that time, Xiaoi Chen's expression was as aggrieved as it could be. When he complained to Yun Shirshir about this matter, She tried to suppress her laughter on the surface and expressed her righteous indignation towards Muyaja. However, she had no choice but to suppress her laughter internally. Ha 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 ha. There was actually such a stupid clown in the world. He didn't turn on the central air conditioner and stupidly wanted to imitate Xiang Juling's warm dinner. Yun Shishir almost suffocated to death. Why didn't you freeze to death? Ha ha ha. Muyaja's rhetorical question was also of the highest quality. Her heart ached for Xiaoqian for 2 seconds. It only lasted for 2 seconds. After sending Hua Jin back to his apartment, Muyaja and Yun Shishir returned home. It was already past 6 o'clock. Yu and Xiaoqian usually finish school at 3:30 p.m. After the two little guys returned home, Yu habitually went to the nearby shopping mall to buy some food. Usually when Yun Shishir returned home, she would be greeted with a delicious dinner. Today was no exception. As soon as Yun Shishir enters the door, she smells an incomparably alluring fragrance. She sniffed and smiled. It smells so good. It looks like braised chicken. Yu poked her head out of the kitchen. Seeing that she had returned, she smiled warmly. Mommy, you're back. He completely ignored Muyaja. Then he went into the kitchen, and there was another flurry of swords and knives. The corners of Muyaja's lips twitched violently. These two little guys were becoming more and more arrogant. In their eyes, besides their dearest mommy, there seemed to be no room for anyone else. He instantly felt that it was unfair. However, it was no wonder that these two little guys didn't want to stick to him. Imagine an innocent child who had studied a text and imitated the story in the text to warm his bed. In the end, he asked, "Why didn't you freeze to death?" Oh my God. Xiaoqian's heart shattered into a million pieces. He felt that Yun Shishir could play with this joke for a year. Chapter 28:12. Yun Shishir was stunned for half a second. Suddenly thinking of something, she asked suspiciously, "Could it be that your grandpa's condition has improved?" Yu shook his head. "Uncle didn't say anything when he called, so I didn't ask too much, but I think it's about Grandpa." Could it be? Yun Shishir was worried. Could it be that his condition has worsened? No, it won't. Yu smiled conceitedly. Hurricane Group's medical standards are definitely the best in the world, and can be counted on one hand. I've only heard of people who were half dead being brought back to life, but I've never heard of people who were perfectly fine being treated to death. No matter how bad it is, it can't be worse than being completely paralyzed. Since Uncle asked us to have a video call after dinner, it shouldn't be an urgent matter. Yu analyzed calmly. Only then did Yun Shishir's heart settle down. That's good then. Even so, Yun Shishir had lost her appetite. She sat at the table after a few mouthfuls of rice, looking a little distracted. Yu saw her restless look and guessed that she was worried about Yun Yeqing. Hence, he put down his bowl and chopsticks, walked to the study room, turned on the computer, and switched to the video call channel. Hurricane Group had a specialized video call software that could be used for both radio signals and wireless networks. However, such a video call software could only be used by the company's internal staff. No matter how powerful an outsider was, he or she could not hack into it. This was to protect Hurricane Group's confidentiality. All the internal communications of Hurricane Group relied on this software. Sometimes, people would be at different ports in the world and hold emergency meetings through video calls. Naturally, security was the most important thing. He initiated a video call. About half a minute later, the signal was connected. The image flickered for a while and soon Gongjie's pair of big eyes appeared. Yu. Uncle, why are there only your eyes in the video call? Gongjie used his phone to receive video signals. He held the phone further away, and his entire face appeared on the screen. He looked at the camera and smiled. Then, he gently fiddled with his slightly messy hair and winked at Yu. Little Yu, did you miss your uncle? No, Yu said bluntly. Gongjie. Didn't you say that you wanted to have a video call with me after dinner? When Mommy found out about this, she thought that Grandpa's injury had worsened and she was worried sick. What exactly happened? Gongjie frowned and said, Idiot, why don't you tell her after dinner? You didn't tell me what it was. Yes, I just want to see her. Gongjie said. Ever since Gongjie returned to Hurricane Group, other than the occasional online chat, Gongjie had not seen Yun Shishir for a long time. After all, there was a time difference of half a world between the two of them. It was night here, morning in Hurricane Group. It was difficult for them to be together due to the time difference. Gong Jie missed her so much that he fell ill. Yu Yu's expression was cold for a while. Then he said indifferently, "I'm hanging up." "Wait." Gong Jie immediately stopped him. "How dare you hang up your uncle's video call? You're so heartless." Chapter 28:13. Seeing that he could not hide it from him, Gong Jie said, "It's nothing much. Actually, it's about your grandpa. A few days ago, your grandpa just went through his third surgery. He successfully underwent skin grafting and passed the critical stage." But, seeing him change the topic, Yu Yu could not help but feel worried. "But what?" "But because his wound was infected, one of his arms had to be amputated." "What?" Yu Yu was stunned. Gong Jie also looked a little regretful. The headquarters did their best. In order to save his legs, they spent a lot of money. However, the infection on his arm was too serious, so they could only amputate it. Otherwise, he might not be able to pass the infection stage. Yu Yu's expression turned solemn. "Can I see him now?" "Yes, but you can only see him through the glass window." "'Kay, then I'll call Mommy." After saying that, Yu Yu ran to the dining room to call Yun Shirshir. When Yun Shirshir heard that Yu Yu had a video call with Gong Jie, she immediately rushed into the study room nervously. Xiao Chen and Mu Yaja also entered the study room. The family of four sat at the study table and saw Gong Jie walking to the door of the ward with his phone. Through the huge floor-to-ceiling glass window, he aimed the phone's camera at the bed. Through the glass window, Yun Shirshir saw Yun Yecheng lying quietly on the bed with an oxygen mask on and his eyes tightly shut. Although he did not look good, he still looked better than when he was seriously injured. After all, at that time Yun Yecheng's face was as pale as wax, as if he was nearing the end of his life. Now his complexion was much better. However, Yun Shirshir quickly noticed Yun Yecheng's empty sleeve. She only saw that one side of his body was empty, seemed to be missing an arm. His arm. Yun Shirshir seemed to have thought of a possibility and asked suspiciously, "Xiao Jie, where's his arm?" "Sister, Uncle's arm was severely infected and had to be amputated. I once considered using cell regeneration surgery, but the project is too big. Even if the surgery can be completed successfully, Uncle might not be able to survive until then. If the infection spreads, it won't just be a matter of amputating an arm." Gong Jie's voice rang out. Yun Shirshir's eyes suddenly dimmed a few notches. Gong Jie turned the camera to face himself and smiled comfortingly. "But don't worry. If there are no accidents and the rehabilitation goes smoothly, Uncle will still be able to walk." "Can he still walk?" "Yes." Gong Jie continued. "Do you remember what the doctor said when Uncle was discharged from the hospital? He inhaled a lot of concentrated sulfuric acid and burned his throat. But these are not big problems. Uncle is fine now. Don't worry." A look of relief finally appeared on her face. "Thank you, Xiao Jie." Gong Jie raised an eyebrow. "Sister, you sound too distant." As he said that, he suddenly smiled devilishly and stuck his handsome face close to the camera. "If you really want to thank me, why don't you give me a kiss?" Yu Yu immediately smiled and leaned in front of the computer screen. She pouted and kissed the camera. Gong Jie saw this and frowned. "Who wants you to kiss me?" Chapter 28:14. Did this guy have to be so arrogant? Gong Jie harumphed coldly. "I'm so disappointed. I've been working so hard and taking care of you in the ward day and night, and you guys still treat me like this." Yun Shirshir smiled and said, "Xiao Jie, don't be sad. When you come back, I'll give you a kiss as soon as you come back." Gong Jie's face finally warmed up a little when he heard this. "Sister dotes on me, but I've been a little busy recently, so I won't be able to come back to see you for a while." "What are you busy with?" "It's about work." Gong Jie didn't go into detail. He only said a few words and didn't exchange too many pleasantries before hanging up the video call. Just as he ended the video call, the phone slipped out of his hand. He fell onto the sofa and couldn't bear the pain any longer. His face turned pale. Alice walked to his side and sized him up coldly. "You're lucky that you could endure it until now. It hurts a lot, doesn't it?" Gong Jie looked at her coldly and harumphed. But he said arrogantly, "This pain is nothing." Before he could finish his sentence, Alice reached out and poked his shoulder. Gong Jie hissed in pain and sucked in a breath of cold air. He pushed her hand away. What are you doing? Didn't you say, this pain is nothing? Let me try and see if you really don't feel pain, or if you're just enduring it. With that, Alice put aside the first aid kit in her hand and emphasized, Young master, it's time to change your dressing. Take off your clothes. Gong Jie reached out silently and tugged at his tie before slowly unbuttoning it. When he thought about the 3 casualties on his return today, he felt a turbid breath brewing in his chest that was difficult to swallow. This time, he went to AFH to transport a batch of military ammunition to the frontline battlefield. When he was about to return home, he was surrounded by the enemy's country M soldiers. A long-range sniper's fatal shot almost took his life. AFH was famous for being dangerous. The reason he accepted this order was to exchange it for chips in other markets. No matter how dangerous this order was, it had to be carried out. However, he did not expect that he would once again make a trip to the gates of hell. Alice didn't help him. She knew very well that no matter how close this man was to her, he would never allow her to take advantage of him. He didn't like anyone touching him. Therefore, even though she knew that he was injured and that it was very difficult for him to do certain actions, she still tactfully did not help him. Gong Jie slowly unbuttoned his shirt and took off his uniform. The black shirt inside had already been stained with blood and was extremely sticky. Fortunately, it was a black shirt that was soaked in blood. Even so, it was hard to tell. I don't know what's wrong with you. You came back injured, but the first thing you thought of was to treat your wound. Aren't you afraid that it will get infected? Gong Jie frowned but didn't say anything. Indeed, when he returned to the Hurricane Group, his first thought was to see Yun Shishir's face. He missed her. He wanted to see her like crazy. He was in so much pain that his mind was in a mess, but there was only one thought that was very clear. He wanted to hear her voice. Chapter 28:15. It was probably because he had just narrowly escaped death. Therefore, he especially wanted to see the person that he missed dearly. When he came back, half of his snow-white uniform was stained with blood, but he still had the strength to change into a dark-colored outfit. Alice was puzzled. You really don't want to live anymore. If the wound gets infected, it'll be very troublesome. With you around, do you think I'll die? He replied unhurriedly. Alice raised her eyebrows. I didn't expect the insufferably arrogant second young Master Gong to have his precious life in the hands of others. Stop talking nonsense. Gong Jie took off his clothes to half his shoulders, closed his eyes, and exposed his wound to the cold air. He asked faintly, Can you find the bullet? Alice immediately put on her gloves, and then bent down slightly to take a look. The bullet didn't completely penetrate the muscle. The wound is between the collarbone and the shoulder. The bullet is embedded in the surface of the flesh, about 2 centimeters. Alice felt that it was inconceivable. She could tell at a glance that this bullet should be a powerful bullet from a sniper rifle. She asked in a daze, How many layers of bulletproof vest did you wear? 1 layer. How is that possible? Alice obviously didn't believe it. With the power of this bullet, even if you wear 2 layers of bulletproof vests, it can still fiercely penetrate your body, instantly lacerating your flesh. It's obvious that the sniper aimed at the fatal position of your heart. It's a miracle that you survived. This bullet didn't enter the body, but was embedded in the epidermis. But according to her rich experience, this kind of bullet, no matter how many bulletproof vests he wore, would not only cause such a wound. Gong Jie looked up and replied coldly, Before I was shot, a death guard stood in front of me to protect me. The bullet first passed through his body, and because I was wearing a bulletproof vest, it blocked a lot of the impact. In other words, the reason why this bullet deviated was because someone protected you and blocked the bullet for you. Fortunately, someone blocked the bullet for you. Otherwise, this bullet is enough to take your life. Based on her estimation, Alice judged that if there were no guards to block the bullet for him, the bullet would definitely cause a bowl-sized wound on his body. Take out the bullet first and then check to see if there are any other wounds. It won't be fun if the ribs are shattered. He still remembered that one of Gong Jie's subordinates was wearing a thick bulletproof vest. However, after being shot, although the bullet did not penetrate the bulletproof vest, the huge impact shattered his ribs, and the rib fragments pierced his heart, killing him on the spot. What a lunatic. Alice took off her gloves and said, "Let's get ready for the surgery." Surgery? What else? Do you want to keep this bullet as a souvenir? Alice asked. There's no need to go to the operating table for such a minor injury, right? The ammunition in the warhead has already spread into the wound. If we don't do in-depth treatment, who knows what will happen? Gong Jie closed his eyes, clenched his fists tightly and slowly got up. However, just as he got up, he only felt darkness in front of his eyes. After a moment of dizziness, he almost fell. Alice immediately reached out to support him. All his weight was on her, so it was inevitable that he was heavy. Chapter 28:16. Gong Jie closed his eyes, clenched his fists tightly and slowly got up. However, just as he got up, he felt his vision go dark. After a moment of dizziness, he almost fell down. Alice immediately reached out to support him. He was leaning all his weight on her, so it was inevitable that he was heavy. What do you usually eat? You're really heavy. Alice said with difficulty. Don't tell father about this. He said in a low voice and closed his eyes. Alice finally became a little nervous. Gong Jie was in a lot of pain. He actually fainted from the pain, which meant that the wound infection had worsened. In such a bad situation, he did not enter the operating room immediately. Instead, he took his phone and made that inexplicable call. However, what Alice did not know was that Gong Jie could not wait to call Yun Shishir's phone because he was always worried that if his injury worsened, he would not have the chance to hear it. As the CEO of the Hurricane Group, his identity meant that he was destined to walk on the edge of hell and the mortal world, not to mention going through hell and hell. No matter how many people there were to protect him, there was never anything that was foolproof. The reason he was shot this time was entirely because he did not expect a certain anti-government organization to be so arrogant and rampant. After he was injured, a group of people escorted him back to the headquarters. The Hurricane Group had its own air route territory. Even if they did not need to report to the signal tower, they could take off at any time and anywhere. When they returned to the headquarters, Gong Jie had lost a lot of blood, but he did not enter the operating room immediately. It was only when he received a video call from Yun Shishir that the huge rock hanging in his heart was finally lifted. Alice was beside herself with anger. Was he joking with his own body? Did he know that if the wound infection worsened, it would be very serious, and he might not even be able to keep his life? She immediately called for people and hurried him into the operating room. In the wee hours of the morning, after 3 hours of intense surgery, Alice finally removed the bullet, cleaned the wound, and checked Gong Jie's other injuries. Fortunately, other than the gunshot wound on his body, there were no other signs of injury. This brat was really lucky. Gong Jie opened his eyes and watched her slowly place a bullet on the tray. Bang! The sound was crisp and clear. Because of the huge impact, the bullet had already been deformed. After the wound was cleaned, she stopped the bleeding, cleaned it up and stitched it up in one go. Alice let out a sigh of relief. Will this place leave a scar? Gong Jie suddenly asked. Alice glanced at him and snorted. What do you think? Such a deep wound will definitely leave a scar. Wouldn't that be ugly? Gong Jie furrowed his eyebrows, obviously disgusted. So far, the thing he was most satisfied with about himself was his well-proportioned body. Especially at the shoulder blade and collarbone, the joints were clear and the texture was distinct. This was inseparable from the fact that he usually paid attention to training. This bullet hole was really ugly. I didn't expect you to be so delicate. However, you'll leave a scar. Isn't it normal for men to have scars? I feel that men with scars on their bodies are very sexy. Shallow. Gong Jie disagreed. I don't think men must have scars on their bodies. It's ugly. Chapter 28:17. Gong Jie's eyes darkened when he heard that. He seemed to be seriously considering this suggestion. Alice glanced at him and suddenly smiled. But even if you want to get a tattoo, you have to wait for a while. At least wait for the wound to heal. Gong Jie ignored her. He frowned and used a little strength to sit up on the operating table. The green sterile cloth that was used to cover his body suddenly slid down his chest, revealing his muscular chest muscles that were full of strength. The anesthesia was partial. He could not feel the left side of his body. Therefore, he could only rely on the right side of his body to provide power. How long will it take for the drug to wear off? He looked back and asked. Alice replied. About an hour later. Damn it. Gong Jia was a little anxious. He gently rubbed his messy forehead and slowly stood up. Alice could not help but look at his naked upper body. However, because of the scene she saw, she swallowed a little in a daze. His body was really amazing. She did not know how he usually trained. The muscles on his body did not belong to the typical style of Mr. Muscle. Every muscle texture was just right. If there was more, he would appear rough and arrogant. If there was less, he would appear thin and restrained. Especially his lower abdomen. His 8-pack abs were well defined. Mermaid's belt and a male dog's waist. It was said that Gong Jia could do 10 one-handed handstands without a problem. What did it mean to do 10 one-handed handstands in one go? There were only 7 one-handed handstands recorded in the world record. Gong Jia could do 10. This kind of waist and abdomen was too scary. Just looking at this kind of body, it would give rise to a lot of 18 forbidden thoughts. It was too erotic. Alice could not help but stare. What are you looking at? I'm studying your male dog's waist. I heard that with a body like yours, your sexual ability should be very strong. Gong Jia's eyes were cold. He said mockingly, You don't even have a man. How can you understand sexual ability? Oh. Alice's face darkened. Was this guy mocking her? Gong Jia's face was expressionless as he tapped his head lightly with his long finger. Also, anyone with half a brain would know that one's figure has nothing to do with ability X. What right do you have to talk about me? Aren't you single as well? As Alice spoke, she snorted coldly. The Gong family is spreading rumors that second young Master Gong's sexual orientation is abnormal. You hang out with mercenaries all day long and there are only men around you. Everyone is suspecting if there's something wrong with your sexual orientation. Gong Jia raised his eyebrows and retorted. Oh? If that's the case, staying in the medical center all day, you're either soaked in the smell of formalin or accompanied by corpses. Miss Alice, could it be that you have a corpse fetish? Alice's face turned even paler. What did you say? You can understand the literal meaning. You don't need me to explain, right? After Gong Jia said that, he snorted coldly. He dared to amuse her. He needed to be taught a lesson. In the entire Hurricane group, he was definitely second to none when it came to venomous tongues. To amuse him? You're asking for it. Gong Jia was a little disgusted by the smell of disinfectant in the operating room. He frowned and looked down at his wound. It had been completely cleaned, neatly stitched up and bandaged with gauze. He got up, pulled out the retention needle in his hand, and walked towards the door. Hey, you still need to continue the anti-inflammatory. Bang! Chapter 28:18. What answered him was the cold sound of the door closing. Alice knew in her heart that Gong Jia was probably in a bad mood at the moment. He even became impatient with the usual jokes. After all, a comrade in the team had died, so he should be very anxious. In the morgue, Gong Jia put on a coat and slowly walked in. A group of people was cleaning up the body. Hearing the sound of the door opening, everyone looked over. When they saw him, they immediately bowed respectfully. Young Master Gong. How is he? He's still cleaning the congealed bloodstains on his body. Gong Jia pushed through the crowd and walked over. He saw a man lying straight on the morgue bed. Because of the time of death, his body was completely stiff. All the clothes on his body were carefully removed. Because of the congealed blood, the clothes and skin were stuck together. It took a lot of effort to separate the clothes from the flesh. Gong Jia looked down and his expression gradually turned cold. It happened suddenly. In such a chaotic scene, artillery fire flew everywhere. Smoke filled the air and gunshots were endless. His cargo plane was parked far away. After the transaction, he had to pass through a war-torn area to return to the temporary tarmac. Gong Jia was escorted all the way. In just a few seconds he thought about some things and slightly relaxed his vigilance. Then an accident happened. An armed person lying in ambush on a signal tower in the distance raised his sniper rifle and aimed at his head. He had an anti-signal device on his body. The alarm sounded. The death guard beside him reacted immediately. Before he could figure out where the enemy was, he pounced on him without thinking and used his body to protect him. In just half a second, Gong Jia heard a gunshot. Then, almost in an instant, warm blood almost splattered all over his face. He widened his eyes in shock. After a short pause, he quickly realized that something had happened. He was attacked. There were a total of 2 bullets. One bullet blew up the Death Guard's head and pierced into the bushes in the distance. The other bullet penetrated his chest. In the end, because of the bulletproof vest, it pierced into his flesh. In a short period of time, the Death Guard who had pounced on him stopped breathing. His body went limp on the ground, and his head was badly mutilated. It was a ghastly sight. And now, this sacrificed Death Guard was being transported back to the headquarters. Gong Jia walked to the morgue and looked down at the quiet person on the bed. Counting carefully, this was probably the 3rd guard who had lost his life because of him. Gong Jia asked coldly, "What is his family background?" "Young Master Gong, his code name is X1. He has a younger sister and a mother at home. Make arrangements for his funeral." About the amount of compensation, Gong Jia said, 10 million. Send it to his family on a check. The crowd sucked in a breath of cold air. Oh my God. 10 million. This was definitely a considerable sum. It should be known that in any mercenary organization, once a person was sacrificed, the compensation they would receive would definitely be a small portion. For example, in the Red Thorn Special Agent Organization, if someone died for some reason, the organization would at most give out 2 million as compensation. 10 million was an astronomical figure for a mercenary. The financial resources of the Hurricane Group were really terrifying. Facing everyone's doubts, Gong Jia said, "He protected my life. My life is far more than this amount." Chapter 28:19. He had been trained in a mercenary organization since he was young, and he had developed a courageous spirit. Therefore, to him, 10 million yuan was definitely worth that much just based on this person's sincerity. "Young Master Gong, how should we deal with this matter? Have you found any information about that sniper?" "No." His subordinate replied. "There are constant wars in Afghanistan. Many of the anti-government forces are not organized, and there are even many members of terrorist organizations mixed in. However, from their uniforms you can tell which anti-government military organization they are from. AF was in constant war, and the anti-government forces were divided into different organizations. Therefore, they needed to be differentiated. Find that organization," Gong Jia ordered. "Bring the leader of that organization back." Yes. The hospital was filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant. The hospital bed shook. Chu Ho supported her upper body and lay there for a day and a night. She felt that her head was unbelievably heavy. If this continued, she did not know how long it would take for her to recover. Chu Ho originally wanted to listen to Meng Qingxue, so she just lay there quietly and did nothing. But when she thought of Xiao Baochu, she felt uneasy again. She missed him. Even though she had regained her memories of Xiao Baochu were still very deep. She missed him. In this world, this child was her only family member, and the person she cared about the most. She had to recover quickly, find him, and wait for him to leave this place. Thinking of this, He gritted her teeth and struggled to stand up with the help of the bed. When Meng Qingxue came back with the food, she saw Chu Ho from afar holding onto the wall and walking with difficulty. It was extremely difficult for her to walk. Unlike her usual fast steps, she held onto the wall with one hand and used the other to maintain her balance. She walked with difficulty. Meng Qingxue quickly put the lunchbox aside and rushed over nervously. "Chu Ho, why did you get out of bed?" she complained. "Didn't I tell you that I was going to get some food and would be back soon? Why did you get out of bed? Are you looking for something?" "I'm taking a walk to recover my energy," He explained seriously. "Exercise. You used your head for this surgery so you don't need to rehabilitate your limbs," Meng Qingxue explained, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Chu Ho looked up at her deeply and said with a smile, "If you lie down like this, your limbs will be stiff. Walking around will allow me to recover faster." When she was still working in Interpol, she was often injured. Therefore, she knew what to do to recover faster. Meng Qingxue could not win an argument with her. She also knew that the latter was stubborn, so she did not stubbornly argue with her. Instead, she smiled at her and said, "I've prepared some millet porridge and side dishes for you. You can only eat liquid food now, but it won't fill you up. I've asked the doctor. Millet porridge is edible. Okay, thank you. Meng Qingxue helped her into the ward and brought in a bowl of millet porridge. The doctor had repeatedly reminded her to have a bland diet, so she had only prepared a bland meal. Although it was a little monotonous, given Chu-hee's condition, she could only eat bland food. When you're better, we'll have a good meal. Chu-ho held her chopsticks and said calmly, I'm not particular about food as long as it's edible. She looked up and asked, Have you eaten? Chapter 28:20. Meng Qingxue nodded hurriedly. Yes, I ate at the canteen. Oh, what did you eat? I ate buns and dried tofu. Are you full? You don't want to eat more? Meng Qingxue quickly waved her hand. No, I'm full. Chu-ho nodded. Meng Qingxue sat opposite her and quietly watched her eat her porridge. She didn't know why, but ever since Chu-ho woke up after her operation, her entire aura had changed. In the past, although Chu-ho looked cold on the surface, she still had an extremely gentle aura. It was probably because she was a mother that she was very easygoing. However, the current Chu-ho only made her think of one word. Machine. Her eyes were cold, and her expression was indifferent. Even when she was eating, she was like a robot. Her eyes were rigid and her face was serious, as if she didn't have any emotions. However, such a posture was very elegant and pleasing to the eye. She was like a noble gentleman of the royal family. Her facial features were very beautiful, but because of her short hair, she had a cold aura that some women didn't have. For a moment, she couldn't think of any man who could conquer such an aura. Meng Qingxue couldn't help but imagine what kind of person Xiao Bao's father was. A man who could conquer Chu-ho must be very powerful. She was very curious. However, after Chu-ho woke up, he didn't mention anything about the past. This made her more or less disappointed. Although she knew that there were some things that she shouldn't ask about, she was still very curious. After struggling for a long time in her heart, Meng Qingxue finally mustered the courage to ask, Chu-ho, do you remember those things in the past? I'm full. Chu-ho acted as if he didn't hear her question. He put down the bowl and picked up the napkin to gently wipe the corner of his mouth. Meng Qingxue's words were interrupted. She glanced at the bowl. She didn't drink much, only half a bowl. She couldn't help but feel puzzled. Are you full? Yes, I'm full. Chu-ho's tone was very calm. Meng Qingxue, on the other hand, was very sensitive. She pursed her lips and asked suspiciously, Did I ask something I shouldn't have and you're upset? Chu-ho looked up and met her eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, You just asked me if I remembered the past. I heard it clearly, but I don't want to answer. His tone was sharp and clear, without any sloppiness. You don't want to tell me? Meng Qingxue was disappointed. Why don't you want to talk about it? Chu-ho said, Not a good memory. How could that be? Don't tell me that after so many years, there isn't a single memory that makes you happy? Yes. Chu-ho paused and said, There are some memories that make me feel warm, like you and Xiao Bao. I cherish them very much. Meng Qingxue smiled. Suddenly, she saw that Chu-ho's expression gradually turned cold. There are some memories that are like humiliation in my heart. Even if I remember them, I don't want to look back. Meng Qingxue was stunned. Is it about that man? Yes. Xiao Bao's biological father, right? When Chu-ho heard this, he smiled expressionlessly. Yes. You don't have any feelings for him. Meng Qingxue thought hard. Or did he betray you? I betrayed him. Whether it's me or him, I don't have any feelings for him. Chapter 28:21. Then, how did you guys get together with Xiao Bao? Meng Qingxue asked cautiously. Chu-ho's gaze suddenly turned sharp. Seeing the change in her gaze, Meng Qingxue immediately said, It's okay if you don't want to talk about it. It's my fault for being nosy. I shouldn't have asked so much. It's okay. Chu-ho lowered her eyes with a cold gaze. For the past few days, Chu-ho had been recuperating in the hospital in peace. However, ever since Mu Yanqing and Meng Qingxue parted on bad terms, he had not come to the hospital or look for her. In order to take care of Chu-ho, Meng Qingxue settled herself in the hospital. After all, she was not in good health and had to take a pregnancy stabilizing injection every day. It was slightly more convenient to settle herself in the hospital. Within a few days, Chu-ho noticed her abnormality. "Where's Mu Yanqing?" she asked Meng Qingxue. "Why hasn't he come to look for you these past few days?" Meng Qingxue was washing clothes. When she heard her question, her expression became even more desolate, but she did not say anything in the end. Chu-ho walked to her side and asked indifferently, "Did you have a fight?" "No." "Then what happened?" "I made him angry," Meng Qingxue said somewhat vexedly. "He probably misunderstood me. Anyway, it's complicated. I seem to have triggered his most sensitive part." Chu-ho did not know how to respond for a moment. Suddenly, she asked the most important question. "What do you plan to do with him?" "I heard that he has a fiancé." "How did you know?" Meng Qingxue asked in surprise. Chu-ho narrowed her eyes and suddenly asked meaningfully, "Do you know what I used to do?" Meng Qingxue looked confused and shook her head. Chu-ho slowly leaned closer to her and said word by word, "I was an intelligence agent and later worked at the Interpol headquarters." Meng Qingxue thought she was joking and couldn't help but tease. "You're that good." "Humph." Chu-ho continued, "However, I can tell that he cares more about you and doesn't have any feelings for his fiancée. Although this man's character was a little bad, his nature was not bad. At the very least, he treats you with sincerity." Meng Qingxue's expression suddenly froze. She suddenly threw her clothes into the laundry sink and muttered gloomily, "So what?" Chu-ho sized her up and suddenly smiled. "Do you know what you look like now?" "What?" "A self-pitying abandoned woman." Meng Qingxue's expression was extremely ugly. "Didn't I tell you to fight for what you want? Do whatever it takes to get it?" Meng Qingxue looked at her abruptly. "You mean, you want me to compete with that woman? What's the problem?" Chu-ho cast a sidelong glance at her. "You don't dare?" It's not that I don't dare, but I don't have the confidence." "Without confidence, it's the same as having no guts." Chu-ho smiled. "As long as you want something, you should work hard to fight for it, right? As long as you think it's worth it, you should fight for it at all costs." After that, she got up, returned to the hospital bed and lay down. Meng Qingxue continued to wash her clothes, but no one knew what she was thinking about. It was only when Chu-ho fell asleep that she finished washing the clothes and hung them up to dry. Chapter 28-22. Meng Qingxue continued to wash the clothes, but no one knew what she was thinking about. It was not until Chu-ho fell asleep that she finished washing all the clothes and slowly hung them up to dry. She returned to the ward and took out her phone. After hesitating for a long time, she finally tapped on Mu Yanqing's number. The call went through, and after a few rings, it was hung up. Hearing the beeping sound from the other end of the line, Meng Qingxue curled her lips coldly and dialed the number again. This time, however, the man was determined not to pick up her call. He did not even give her a chance to ring before he hung up the call. Meng Qingxue persevered and kept dialing. Mu Yanqing then patiently hung up the call. Meng Qingxue, on the other hand, was unbelievably persistent. On the 99th call, Mu Yanqing could not take it anymore. He picked up the call and yelled angrily, "Meng Qingxue, are you crazy?" From his tone, it seemed that he had drunk a little and was in a tipsy state. His words were childish and angry like a child. The background was a little noisy. There was no need to think. He must have gone to the bar to drink again. For some reason, when she heard his voice, Meng Qingxue's originally calm face finally rippled. Her eyes suddenly turned red, and her dry lips paused for a moment before she finally said his name. "Yanqing, I miss you so much." As soon as she said this, tears suddenly gushed out. Meng Qingxue could not help but wipe the corners of her eyes with her hand. She hated herself for being so disappointing, and felt that this fragile look was too laughable. Why was she so disappointing? She had clearly thought of venting all the grievances and frustrations she had felt over the past few days as soon as he picked up the phone. However, when the words reached her throat, once she heard his voice, she could not help but soften. Perhaps it was because her love was etched in her bones that she was defeated in the whirlpool of love and had to compromise repeatedly. Perhaps those who had never loved would never understand how hopeless it was to be afraid of losing someone. Because he loved her too much, he was always in a humble position at the watershed of many relationships, lowering himself into the dust. Mu Yanqing was born arrogant, so he had his pride. But she loved him so much that she didn't even care about her self-esteem. I miss you very much. Where are you? I'll go and find you. Mu Yanqing was stunned when he heard that. His voice suddenly became erratic. Don't come looking for me. We're already over. End. Meng Qingxue widened her eyes in shock. Just as she was about to say something, Mu Yanqing sneered and said, Qingxue, I'm the one who's incapable of giving my woman a carefree and happy life like my insufferably arrogant second brother. I feel that I have a clear conscience towards you, but when I think about what you said that day, it still feels like a fishbone stuck in my throat. I don't understand why. In your eyes I'm like this. Mu Yanqing's throat became hoarse as he gritted his teeth and hung up the call. It's not like that. It's not like that. Meng Qingxue stood up abruptly and grabbed her bag tightly. As she rushed out of the door, she quickly dialed his number, but he still chose to hang up on her every call. He's not picking up my calls. Chapter 28-23. Was he really going to end this relationship? She originally thought that he was just in a fit of anger that day, and that he would think things through in a few days. She had said those words in a fit of anger that day, and he had misinterpreted her meaning. However, she did not expect it to be so serious. She did not expect that those words that day would be such a huge blow to him. Meng Qingxue hurriedly hailed a taxi and instructed the driver. Bar Street. Okay. The driver familiarly turned on the meter. When night fell, the traffic was not so congested. They sped all the way to the bar. Meng Qingxue alighted at the bar that Mu Yanqing frequented the most. After paying the fare, she clenched her fists and slowly walked into the bar. As soon as she stepped through the door, she was immediately surrounded by the almost deafening rhythmic beats. She rarely came to places like bars, and even if she did, it was more often with Mu Yanqing. Meng Qingxue was not used to it for a moment and hurriedly covered her ears. It was midnight. At this time the nightlife had just begun and the bar had just started warming up. Amidst the music, unrestrained men and women stood on the dance floor, constantly swaying to the rhythm. Meng Qingxue shuttled through the crowd and slowly sized up the bar counter. Such seats were usually occupied by young models and beautiful women. This bar was very famous and often visited by singers and actors. After disguising themselves, they would hunt in such places. The entire bar was taken over by the young models' company. At this time, the company would arrange for many young models to sit in this place. Once any producer came here for entertainment and saw them, he would personally pick one. At this time, if the young model worked hard enough and was willing to go all out, what would happen in the future would depend on her own luck. Meng Qingxue then walked to the booth of the private room. When she passed by the third booth, she saw Mu Yanqing being surrounded by a group of people. He was an extremely outstanding man. Even in such a noisy environment, she could see him at a glance with his outstanding appearance and noble temperament. When Meng Qingxue saw him, she was stunned for 2 seconds before she finally reacted. She turned around and walked into the booth. Mu Yanqing was drinking. He could no longer remember how many glasses he had drunk, nor could he remember how many days it had been since he indulged himself in the noisy music and ended up dead drunk. Stop drinking. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from above. Mu Yanqing jerked back to his senses and looked up, only to see Meng Qingxue standing in front of him. Her breathing was slightly undulating as she stared at him intently. Why did you get yourself into this state? You're drunk. Stop drinking. It's none of your business. Mu Yanqing pushed her expressionlessly. Just as he was about to reach for the wine glass, Meng Qingxue took the initiative to snatch the glass. Stop drinking. Oh. Mu Yanqing raised his head and met her gaze with a pair of cold eyes. A well-dressed woman sitting next to him saw her actions and could not help but feel a little displeased. She asked snappily, "Who are you? Why are you poking your nose into other people's business?" Meng Qingxue glanced at her and retorted sarcastically, "Do I have anything to do with you? I'm minding my man. Why are you interrupting?" Meng Qingxue mocked her coldly again. His domineering declaration made everyone's jaws drop to the floor. What? This woman claimed that Mu Yanqing was her man. Chapter 28-24. Mu Yanqing waved her hand away. I've said it before, you don't have to care about me. With that, he reached out to snatch the wine glass from Meng Qingxue's hand. Meng Qingxue dodged and suddenly picked up the wine glass. She pressed her lips against the rim of the glass and pretended to drink it in one gulp. When Mu Yanqing saw this, his mind shuddered and only one thought flashed across his mind. She was pregnant and could not drink. Almost instinctively, he snatched the wine glass from her hand and smashed it on the ground. There was a loud bang. The wine glass shattered and the floor was in a mess. Because of this sudden scene, everyone sitting in the private room was so shocked that they did not dare to breathe. It was obvious that Mu Yanqing was really angry. Once this man was angry, he was extremely frightening. Everyone was so scared that they did not dare to speak. Mu Yanqing was filled with anger and almost roared. "Don't you know that pregnant women can't drink? Are you crazy?" Just as he finished speaking, a woman was so surprised that she screamed in shock. "Oh my God! Pregnant! This woman is pregnant!" Otherwise, why would Mu Yanqing say such a thing? If she was really pregnant, then there was no need to think about whose child she was carrying. This woman's background was not simple. One had to know that Mu Yanqing was famous for being a playboy in the circle. He had countless affairs and had many women. However, he had never allowed any woman to do anything out of line. It was even more impossible for her to get pregnant. However, this woman was definitely an exception. Who exactly was she? What was even more surprising was that she actually dared to slap the table and talk to Mu Yanqing. Wasn't she too arrogant because she was pampered? Should Mu Yanqing dote on her a lot? Only Meng Qingxue raised her head to look at him. She then smirked coldly. "I only asked you to stop drinking. You're already so drunk." Mu Yanqing was stunned and he suddenly frowned. "Let's go back." "No." Meng Qingxue reached out to pull his hand. "Let's go back together, okay? Don't touch me." Mu Yanqing brushed her hand away abruptly and turned to leave. Meng Qingxue knew that he had drunk too much and was in a bad mood, so his face was very ugly. She immediately chased after him out of the bar, only to see him standing by the side of the street. Under the streetlights, his back was elongated, and he looked extremely lonely. Mu Yanqing took out a cigarette box, lit it and took 2 deep puffs. When he heard footsteps rushing out from behind him, he turned around to take a look. Meng Qingxue immediately walked towards him. Mu Yanqing did not even spare him a glance as he turned around and strode down the street. Meng Qingxue quickly followed. The two of them walked one after the other. His legs were long and his strides were wide. She was worried about the child in her belly, so she naturally couldn't run. However, following him at such a fast pace was gradually becoming a little strenuous. How could he walk so fast? Meng Qingxue said. "Yanqing, wait for me, okay?" Mu Yanqing did not react at all. Meng Qingxue became increasingly anxious and chased after him even faster. Her breathing gradually quickened. "Don't walk so fast. Wait for me, wait for me." She kept chasing after him. There were a few times when she was so anxious that she almost tripped over the gravel under her feet. Meng Qingxue was angry and anxious. Chapter 28-25. Mu Yanqing walked in front expressionlessly. She did not know what he was thinking, but his mind was in a daze. Amidst the chaos, there seemed to be countless noisy voices scheming. Suddenly, Meng Qingxue's broken voice came from behind. "Yanqing, are you willing to give me a minute? I have something to tell you." She almost used all her strength to shout this sentence. Mu Yanqing stopped in his tracks but did not turn around. Meng Qingxue could no longer walk. She held her knees and panted slightly, but as she panted, tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. "Is it fun to misinterpret my words? Can't you tell what's said in anger, what's envious and what's serious?" She raised her head abruptly. "All right, then let me tell you. Hating you is said in anger. Saying that Yun Shishir is very happy is envious. Saying I love you and I miss you is the most serious thing I've ever said to you. Mu Yanqing, I don't know why I fell in love with you. After thinking about it for so long, I vaguely realized that other than you, there's probably no one else in this world who dotes on me more than you, right?" As Meng Qingxue spoke, her eyes turned redder and tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. Mu Yanqing's heart throbbed painfully when he heard her words. It was as if something was tearing it apart. "My life seems to have always been bleak and without light. I left home and went to the capital to seek a career, but I also went astray. When I entered a modeling agency, I was lucky to meet you. Finally, there was someone who could hold me in the palm of his hand, take good care of me and dote on me. You know that in this world, other than you, there's probably no one else who would tolerate and dote on me so much. I tried my best to be careful and obedient so that you wouldn't get tired of me. I love you. In this relationship, I must be the most humble one. My attitude must be as low as the dust. I knew that such humility wouldn't earn anyone's respect. Even I was degrading myself. Or maybe I was too naive. I accidentally bumped into love, and was so happy that I didn't care about my future life. I didn't even confirm if you really loved me and if we would have a future. I was like a moth flying into a flame and thought that this was love. After a pause, Meng Qingxue smiled bitterly. Unfortunately, you don't seem to love me that much. You're always busy, you never answer my calls, you always have a lot of social engagements, and you always have a lot of women. Many nights, the one by your side isn't me, but someone else's woman. I've been sad, I've been disappointed, I've been jealous, I've been envious. I've also had the impulse to leave you and fly to a faraway place. There will always be someone who loves me more than you, who will tolerate me more. At the very least, someone who truly cares about me and only me. Meng Qingxue sucked in a deep breath of cold air as tears streamed down her cheeks uncontrollably. But every time I packed my luggage and was about to leave you, I looked back at the apartment and saw our shadows in every corner. Only then did I know that I can't lose you at all. I can't leave you. Perhaps you don't feel this way because you're so proud. It's not impossible for you to live without anyone. But I'm different. I'm different. I can't leave you. Chapter 28-26. She bit her trembling lips and sobbed. But I'm actually like a parasite on your body. It's as if I'll go extinct if I leave you. I know that I'm weak and lowly like this, but I still want you to know that I won't be able to live if I leave you. Mu Yanqing, what do I have to do for you to truly love me for once? Will you only know how I feel about you if I cut out my heart and hold it in front of you? This way, will you cherish me a little more? Mu Yanqing's face suddenly turned pale. Her words were heart-wrenching, every word weeping blood. What kind of situation had she been forced into that she would say such things? Mu Yanqing's heart ached, only to see Meng Qingxue suddenly clutching her stomach with an ugly expression. Beads of sweat rolled down her face. It hurts, it hurts. She suddenly clutched her stomach and arched her body slightly like a shrimp in pain. Yanqing, my stomach hurts, it hurts. Mu Yanqing's mind went blank when he saw her in this state. He immediately rushed toward her anxiously. However, just as he reached her, Meng Qingxue smiled, looked up and hugged him fiercely. I told myself that as long as you rushed toward me at once, I'd set my mind on you for the rest of my life. She hugged him tightly. He walked toward her without thinking, which meant that he cared about her. Just based on this point alone, she had set her mind on him. The only time she took the initiative to grasp him was because she had set her mind on this man. No one was perfect. Mu Yanqing was not a perfect man. However, there were too many things about him that were worth her paranoia. He was the only man who was willing to give up his wealth for her. She was willing to humble herself a little more just to hold on to him. Mu Yanqing immediately reacted. It turned out that she was pretending to be in pain just now. It was not a stomachache. It was just a smokescreen. You! He could not help but feel a little angry. Meng Qingxue looked up at him and said word by word. Yanqing, even if you have nothing, I won't be afraid. I only want you. You're enough. I only want to be with you. Mu Yanqing's face froze as he stared at her in disbelief. Meng Qingxue had always been a reserved woman. She rarely spoke sweet nothings or acted coquettishly. She also rarely played any sweet tricks with him. This was the first time she had lied to him. Yanqing, I've already sworn in my heart that no matter what, you belong to me. I'll take you back at all costs and keep you by my side. Meng Qingxue paused for a moment before continuing. I know that I'm not outstanding or good enough. I don't have Song Enya's background and family background, but I'll work hard. Okay? I will work hard to become an outstanding woman until that day comes. Wait for me, okay? Mu Yanqing pursed his lips and shook his head with a smile. He ruffled her hair lovingly and pulled her gently into his embrace. No need. When Meng Qingxue heard this, she said angrily, What? You don't even want to give me a chance to work hard? Mu Yanqing could not help but laugh. You don't have to compromise. As long as you acknowledge me and I acknowledge you, you don't have to fight or fight. Just be yourself. Because I'm yours and you're mine. Chapter 28-27. Qingshu, I swear. I don't have any feelings for Song Enya. Nor do I have any feelings for other women. I've decided on you. I'm willing to protect you and only you. No one will snatch me away and no one can snatch me away. I've decided on you. Mu Yanqing's eyes revealed a rare tenderness. He gently kissed her forehead, then slowly kissed the corners of her eyes. He kissed away her warm tears and suddenly sealed her lips. Yanqing, I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Meng Qingxue hugged his shoulders and confessed affectionately. You're in all of my imagination for the future. I've also thought of giving up on you, but I can't. Mu Yanqing's heart ached. He suddenly felt that he really owed this woman so much. He always made her cry, always made her wait, and always made her wait for nothing. At first, he thought that she was like those other women and did not seem to be particularly special. However, it was not until the day he lost her that he seemed to have lost his mind and searched for her all over the city. Only then did he realize that she had unknowingly occupied such an important place in his heart. At first, he was with her only because of her looks and figure, which could give him a fresh feeling. However, as time passed, her obedience and her sensibility no longer gave him so much burden. In fact, every time he returned to her side, he felt the warmth of returning home. Later, when the passion turned cold, love slowly lost its novelty and became a habit. He was used to waking up with her in his arms. He was used to having her by his side when he was frustrated. He was used to her gentle and soft words. He was used to her warm embrace. Only then did he realize how important she was. His family background and the environment he grew up in had destined him to be arrogant and insecure. He was cautious at every step and did not have any sense of belonging. Therefore, he had always been obsessed with building a fortress and sealing himself in it. In fact, he was unbelievably fragile. He admitted that he was not as outstanding as Muyaja. That kind of man was too perfect and too dazzling. He kept chasing after him, but in the end, he was still reduced to a foil and a joke. He couldn't accept it. That was why he was deeply hurt by her careless words. Qingshu, I love you. I really love you. These 3 words had been brewing in his heart for a long time, but every time he wanted to confess his feelings, he was too embarrassed to say it, so he forced himself back down. But at this moment, no matter what, he was going to reveal everything to her. I want to give you the best life. Even if I have to resort to any means, I will ensure that you will never have to worry about food and clothing. Mu Yanqing gently caressed her sideburns and smiled. Don't think too much about it and I don't need you to fight for it. I'm yours. I belong to you, Meng Qingxue only cared about her tears. She hugged him tightly and cried until she couldn't speak. If I cut out my heart and held it in front of you, would you know what kind of feelings I have for you? This way, will you cherish me a little more? What can I do to make you cherish me even more? Her words still echoed in his ears. Mu Yanqing's heart felt like it was being pierced by a needle as he hugged her even tighter. From now on, I will cherish you even more. Chapter 28-28. Chu Ho was startled awake by a soft rustling sound. She had always been a light sleeper. Probably because of her profession, she was more alert than ordinary people. Hence, even in her deep sleep, she could detect even the slightest movement. Chu Ho suddenly opened her eyes. In the darkness, she saw Meng Qingxue tiptoeing into the ward. Behind her, Mu Yanqing strode in. The leather shoes on his feet were very hard, so when they landed on the ground, they made a loud sound. Meng Qingxue did not realize that Chu Ho had woken up. She thought that Chu Ho was still asleep, so she turned around and whispered to Mu Yanqing. Shh! Keep your voice down and don't make such a big noise. She's still resting. Such a small noise won't wake her up at all. Meng Qingxue silently weighed the pros and cons in her heart for a long time. She was still worried about leaving Chu Ho alone in the hospital, so she said to Mu Yanqing, "Why don't you go back first? I'll stay here tonight to accompany Chu Ho. After all, she just had surgery and needs someone to take care of her." Mu Yanqing said gloomily, "Qingxue, you're pregnant. You need someone to take care of you. The doctor wants you to rest in bed more otherwise. But let's go back and rest tonight. Tomorrow, I'll hire 2 nannies to take turns taking care of her. After Mu Yanqing said that, he paused and asked her, "Is that okay? How can I be at ease leaving you alone in the hospital?" Meng Qingxue pursed her lips. Mu Yanqing pulled Meng Qingxue into his arms without any explanation and kissed her forehead heavily. There was a hint of grievance and resentment in his voice. "Are you really not going back with me? How long has it been since we slept together?" Meng Qingxue was stunned and her face quickly turned hot. She frowned and said, "You don't talk nonsense." However, he continued, "How is this nonsense? Qingxue, I'm already used to seeing you when I wake up in the morning. But when you left at that time, I couldn't sleep well. I finally found you and waited for you to come back. But in the end, you're guarding a woman who's neither your relative nor your friend. You're busy working for her. Have you really never considered my feelings?" "What do you mean by unrelated?" Meng Qingxue said unhappily. "Chuho treats me very well. In my heart, I treat her as my biological sister." "You're being too biased," Mu Yanqing snorted. "Instead of accompanying your man, you're actually accompanying a woman." How can I accompany you?" Meng Qingshua's face burned even hotter. She lowered her head and mumbled, "I'm already pregnant. How can I sleep with you?" "What are you thinking?" The man was amused by her scruples. "No matter how crazy I am, I'll never do anything to a pregnant woman." "You're pregnant. How could I do anything to you? I just want to hug you to sleep. Can't I do that?" Meng Qingxue was doubtful of his words. "Is that really what you're thinking?" "Yes, I swear." "Then, all right." Meng Qingxue finally agreed. Mu Yanqing smiled in satisfaction, hugged the back of her neck, and pecked her lips. Meng Qingxue placed the supper she had bought on the table and let Mu Yanqing hug her as they left. Chapter 28-29. What kind of lovey-dovey behavior was this? In the middle of the night, she was caught off guard and they were showing off their affection. Supper? What's the point of eating supper? She was already full from all the PDA. So these two were here to deliver PDA? However, Chu Ho did not have the awareness of being single. He did not feel much about other people showing off their love. It was just that he was woken up in the middle of the night while sleeping soundly. He gritted his teeth in hatred. Why? Did the two of them make up? Earlier, a certain woman was still crying as if the sky was about to collapse. In her dreams, she actually heard Meng Qingxue crying secretly in a corner. Now everything was fine? Chu Ho furrowed his brows but did not think too much about it. He turned over and fell into a deep sleep again. The day after he brought Meng Qingxue back, Mu Yanqing bought an apartment next to Dishing Building. It was a few hundred meters away and could be reached in a few steps. Initially, he had thought of buying her a villa when he came back and then settling her down well. He would give her a few nannies, servants, and housekeepers so that she could take care of her pregnancy in peace. However, after thinking about it, if he were to buy a villa, it would definitely be far away. Very few villas in the capital were in the city center. Usually, they were in areas with good feng shui, especially in the area around Yunshan-Shi, where large areas of villas were developed. However, if he really arranged for her to live in a place so far away, it would be inconvenient for him to get stuck in a traffic jam. If anything happened to him, she would be far away from the hospital and his company. Therefore, after serious consideration, he finally decided to settle her in a high-end apartment next to Dishing Building. Changcheng Mansion was probably the most high-end apartment in this area. It was divided into small and large apartments. The large apartment was a large duplex apartment, with a total of more than 300 square meters. Mu Yanqing decided to buy an apartment. The apartment was exquisitely renovated and could be moved in with a bag. He even carefully sent someone to measure the formaldehyde and there was no problem. In the end, he chose a duplex apartment to separate the moving area from the scenic area. When he was working, he would not disturb her. Don't underestimate this 300 square meters. As it was located in the bustling city center, Mu Yanqing spent more than 20 million yuan on a duplex apartment like this. It was close and convenient. Downstairs was a department store, a hospital, a supermarket, and a market. Everything was available. Meng Qingxue did not know about this. So as soon as she pushed open the door to the apartment, she was greeted with a luxurious sight. Crystal chandeliers, stylish murals, high-end staircases and expensive carpets. All of this was simply inconceivable. I bought it before. I bought it for your pregnancy. Mu Yanqing held her hand as they walked in and closed the door. Looking at the incredulous look on her face, he felt great satisfaction in his heart. Do you like it? I do, Meng Qingxue mumbled. But I can't believe that this is for me. Who else could it be if not for you? If you like, you can stay here even after you give birth to a child. He suddenly held her hand. There are a total of 3 master bedrooms, 2 guest rooms and a nursery. A nursery? Meng Qingxue could not help but be surprised. Chapter 2830. This is the baby's room. Meng Qingxue carefully poked her head in to take a look. The baby's room was specially made. Let's not talk about anything else, just the wallpaper. As this apartment was exquisitely renovated, it was already renovated when it was handed over. The developer would not know if the owner was a boy or a girl. Hence, the wallpaper was made of pink and light blue overlapping. It had the dreamy feel of a little princess and the childlike feel of a little prince. There was a cradle, a small wardrobe, and a mountain of toys. This apartment building was developed by Wan Ku. It had to be said that as a top real estate developer, Wan Ku was extremely meticulous in terms of details. Meng Qingxue was stunned. It was as if she could imagine a baby in diapers exploring this vast world curiously, crawling on the carpet with its hands and feet, and then suddenly jumping into the mountain of furry toys, like a little mouse falling into a millet jar. It was so happy that it didn't want to go home. She could not help but be amused by the scene in her imagination and burst into laughter. Mu Yanqing was a little puzzled. Why are you laughing for no reason? It's nothing. I just thought of something fun. If you like this place, then take good care of your baby. Mu Yanqing slowly walked to the living room and said, It's very quiet here, and it's difficult for ordinary people to come and go. Unless it's the owner who lives here or has a special pass. He turned around and saw Meng Qingxue walking out of the room. His lips curled into a smile. However, I've already instructed the front desk in advance that no matter who wants to see you, they have to give me a call in advance. They can only enter after getting my permission. Are you worried that Li Mengyao will find her way here? Meng Qingxue asked doubtfully. Mu Yanqing nodded. I won't give her a chance to get close to you again. Meng Qingxue smiled. All of a sudden something came to her mind. She furrowed her brows and asked tentatively, Will you come to accompany me often? Or was it still like before? When he was busy, he would forget about her. When he remembered, he would come over to accompany her. Mu Yanqing smiled when he heard this. Why do you think I bought this place? Oh, why? Because. He slowly approached her and whispered into her ear. Because this is my home, too. He saw her dazed expression and felt that she looked really stupid and cute. He couldn't help but scratch her nose. Are you stupid? I said, I'll live here with you too. This place is very close to Mu Group. I can reach the building just by walking a few steps to and from work. Meng Qingxue widened her eyes in surprise. What did you say? You said, you're also living here with me? I'm worried about leaving you alone. Mu Yanqing added. Plus, the Mu family's matters are still unclear, so I'm not in the mood to stay in the main residence. I'll stay here and accompany you so that I can take care of you. Are you going to take care of me? Meng Qingxue snickered disapprovingly. Young Master Mu, you know how to take care of people? Humph, I wonder if you'll be willing to accompany me to the night market if I'm hungry in the middle of the night and want to eat supper. I'm willing. Humph, that's just a nice way of saying it. When the time comes, I'm not sure. Meng Qingxue obviously did not believe him. Chapter 2831. Alright, if you have the time to argue, hurry up and take a shower. It's getting late. Pregnant women should rest early. Mu Yanqing urged her. Meng Qingxue was not used to his concern. In the past, he was not good with words, let alone expressing himself. Sometimes a lot of nice words were often stored in the heart, but never spoken out loud. However, after experiencing this night, he felt a lot of emotions. He also knew that there were some things that weren't that shameful to say. Words of concern, words of love, words of apology if he did something wrong. If these words were not said and kept in his heart, there would be no meaning. He clearly liked her, but if she was sad because of the pride in his bones, it would be meaningless if he did not go forward to hug her. Mu Yanqing coaxed Meng Qingxue to take a shower. After the two of them took a shower, they went to bed to rest. There was something worth mentioning here. The moment Meng Qingxue entered the bedroom, she fell in love with the design of the master bedroom. It was warm and elegant. It felt like home and had a luxurious taste. This apartment must have cost tens of millions. The next day when Meng Qingxue arrived, Chu Ho was not in the ward. She was frightened and quickly asked the nurse at the nurse's desk. The nurse at the nurse's desk said that the patient had put on a jacket and left early in the morning in high spirits. She probably went for a walk in the hospital's back garden, a nurse said suspiciously. Previously, whenever she had lunch or dinner, she would go for a walk downstairs in the ward building. If it weren't for the fact that she's a young lady, we would all say that a girl like her doesn't like to play with her phone or have any entertainment. She's completely like an old cadre. The corners of Meng Qingxue's eyes twitched violently. It turned out that she was not the only one who thought so. Chu Ho was indeed too old cadre. Lying in bed, other than reading the newspaper, she read some books. The hospital would provide some books. Although it was limited, it could be considered a great way to pass the time. To her surprise, Chu Ho's English was jaw-dropping. There were 3 English novels in the hospital. Because the hospital occasionally received foreign patients, they would also provide some foreign books. One day, she saw Chu He holding a foreign novel and reading it seriously. She asked half-jokingly, "Can you understand the English in these books?" "English used to be my mother tongue," Chu Ho said. There were too many mysteries surrounding Chu Ho, but she had never taken the initiative to mention it to her. A public phone booth. Chu Ho held the phone and dialed an international number. After a while the call was connected. Before the other side could speak, Chu Ho spoke first. "Lin Mu, it's me." "You are?" "Vermilion Bird." Hiss. That person couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. How is this possible? Vermilion Bird. Officer Vermilion Bird has already. I'm not dead yet. Are you really the Vermilion Bird? But, Chu Ho interrupted him impatiently. It's only been a few years. Can't you recognize my voice? The other side was obviously shaken. After all, the voice and tone were exactly the same. Being able to call out his name at once made him believe that this mysterious call was from the Vermilion Bird who had been missing for a few years. Chapter 2832. Lin Mu was a member of the Interpol Dispatch Committee and worked in the capital. Therefore, if Chu Ho wanted some help, the first person she thought of was him. "I'm in the hospital now and need some things and help. Are you willing to provide them to me?" After hanging up the phone and walking out of the phone booth, Meng Qingxue finally found her beside the phone booth and immediately called out her name. "Chu Ho." Chu Ho heard her voice and looked in the direction of the sound, only to see Meng Qingxue running toward her with Mu Yanqing behind her. She raised her eyebrows and straightened her body. When she saw Meng Qingxue panting from running, she could not help but chide her. "Why are you in such a hurry? It's not like I hide whenever I see you. Why are you walking around instead of recuperating in the ward?" Chu Ho smiled. "I've almost recovered. Once the stitches are removed, I can be discharged." Mu Yanqing was a little surprised when he heard this. "You've just undergone surgery. How can you be so sure that you've almost recovered?" Chu Ho glanced at him and smiled. "I'm an Interpol officer. I've suffered countless injuries. I know very well how good my recovery ability is. The doctors don't know as well as I do." Meng Qingxue did not believe her and immediately brought Chu Ho to the doctor's office to ask about her condition. After a round of examination, the doctor was completely shocked. Meng Qingxue thought that her condition had worsened and hurriedly asked. The doctor was extremely surprised. "You recovered so quickly?" "Yes. Is this a natural physique?" The doctor was still a little doubtful. Even if she was an immortal, she would not be able to recover so quickly, right? Moreover, it was obvious that she was immortal. An ordinary person would need at least a week to recover after such a surgery, and half a month to be able to walk freely. She insisted on walking the day after the surgery. It had only been a few days since the surgery, but she was actually walking outside the hospital. The doctor found it hard to believe. Meng Qingxue was finally relieved after hearing what the doctor said. However, she was still shocked by Chu-ho's abnormal physique. Chu-ho, how did your body grow? If I had such a good physique like yours, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state after getting pregnant. Chu-ho smiled. When I was pregnant, I was soaked in seawater for 2 days and 1 night, but nothing happened. Everyone's physique is different. When Meng Qingxue heard this, she was stunned for a moment. Then she pulled her to the side. Do you really remember everything? Yes. Then can I ask you something? Someone said that when you were discovered, you drifted over from the sea. What exactly happened? Chu-ho was stunned. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, the car accidentally fell into the sea. There was emergency equipment in the car. I relied on these equipment and drifted on the sea for a night. Perhaps it's lucky that it didn't drift too far away. Anyway, it was a coincidence that the villagers found me later. Chu-ho, your life is really too lucky. You were able to escape from a car that fell into the sea. Meng Qingxue sighed from the bottom of her heart. Chu-ho walked out of the doctor's office and turned to look at Meng Qingxue and Mu Yanqing. He then smiled and asked slowly, have the two of you made up? Chapter 2833. Mu Yanqing's expression turned awkward. Meng Qingxue smiled, held Mu Yanqing's arm, and nodded at her. Chu-ho, thank you. You're the one who taught me that if I love someone deeply, I must fight for it. Yanqing and I have reconciled, and we've decided that no matter what happens in the future, we'll face it together. Chu-ho looked at her and then at Mu Yanqing. Suddenly he smiled and said, it's good that we know each other's feelings. Although this man is quite unreliable in my opinion, he's still a good man. If he's really turned over a new leaf, it's also a good thing. You. Mu Yanqing frowned, clearly unhappy with her belittling him. Since we've reconciled, you don't have to stay in the hospital all day long like an orphan. After a pause, Chu-ho continued, you heard what the doctor said. He said that I'm recovering well, so you don't have to worry. Can you take care of yourself? Meng Qingxue was still a little worried. Of course. Chu-ho frowned. You're pregnant now. If you stay here, I'll have to take care of you. Meng Qingxue blushed at his words and felt a little guilty. Don't you find it boring to be alone? No, Chu-ho said. I like peace and quiet. Then you have to take good care of yourself. After Meng Qingxue and Chu-ho bade farewell, Chu-ho did not return to the ward directly. Instead, he went to a coffee shop at the agreed location. She and Lin Mu agreed to meet at the coffee shop. Considering that she was unfamiliar with the place, Lin Mu specially chose a coffee shop that was very close to the hospital. Chu-ho asked for directions and arrived after walking a street. She entered the coffee shop first and waited for half an hour before Lin Mu finally arrived. Lin Mu was the main person in charge of Interpol's Asian region. To be precise, he was also a very important contact person. When Chu-ho infiltrated the Gu family as a spy, it was also Lin Mu who pulled the strings. No matter how big or small, everything was arranged for her. Lin Mu had just stepped into the coffee shop and looked around. When Chu-ho saw him, he immediately raised his hand to greet him. When he saw Chu-ho for the first time, even though she had changed slightly in the past 5 years, Lin Mu still recognized her immediately. He was so excited that his body began to tremble. He immediately ran over and sat down in front of the booth. The first thing he did was to size her up. After looking for a long time, Lin Mu's eyes couldn't help turning red as he excitedly said, "This is great. Officer, you're actually still alive." When the bad news came, everyone at the headquarters was in disbelief. In their eyes, you are the irreplaceable best intelligence agent. You will not fail easily. Bad news? Chu-ho asked expressionlessly. Who was the one who sent the news of my death back to the headquarters? Actually, it's not news of death. Lin Mu took a deep breath, and then summarized some of the things that happened 5 years ago. When Chu-ho infiltrated the Gu family, he had indeed sent a lot of information back to the headquarters. With this information, the headquarters had some information on Gu Jinglian's whereabouts. Therefore, in many matters, Gu Jinglian suffered a lot. Gu Jinglian was not a fool. After a while, he quickly realized that there was a spy around him. No one knew how he suspected Chu-ho. Chapter 2834. After several incidents, Chu-ho realized that Gu Jinglian was already suspicious of her. She knew this man very well. Once he was suspicious of a subordinate, he would use many methods to test them. Once he was convicted, he would kill them without mercy. At that time, the headquarters sent her back and she tried to escape from him. Who would have thought? Chu-ho was ordered to be killed by Gu Jinglian. If she was alive, he wanted to see her. If she was dead, he wanted to see her corpse. The car fell into the sea and she disappeared without a trace. The entire Gu family reported that Chu-ho had been killed, and this news was also sent back to the headquarters. The headquarters did not dare to jump to conclusions and listed Chu-ho as missing. 2 years later, Chu-ho still did not make any movements. So Liu Yanwei was filled with grief and had no choice but to announce her death. The headquarters held a grand memorial ceremony for her. But they did not know that they had made a mistake. She was not dead. Lin Mu did not know how to deal with this situation. Then what do you plan to do now? Lin Mu said and suddenly noticed the gauze on her head. He was a little shocked. Officer, are you injured? No. Chu-ho touched the gauze and concisely said, "This is a surgical wound. I just had an operation." Lin Mu quickly asked, "What happened?" "There was a blood clot in my head. I had an operation." "Oh, so it's like that." Lin Mu nodded and returned to the previous topic. "Then you plan to go back to the headquarters?" "Lin Mu, I have a child." Lin Mu was stunned for a moment. His facial muscles twitched for a long time before he made a "huh" sound. It was clear that he did not understand. "What do you mean?" 5 years ago, when I left the Gu family, I was pregnant. Chu-ho paused and curled her lips. "Because of that accident, I fell into the sea. I escaped with my life, but I accidentally lost my memory. After I found out that I was pregnant, I did not know what to do. I did not want to abort the child and gave birth to it." "Child? Where did the child come from?" Lin Mu suddenly had a bad premonition. "It can't be." Chu-ho knew what he was thinking. He nodded and said, "Yes, this child is Gu Jinglian's." How is this possible?" Lin Mu suddenly slapped the table and stood up, startling the waiter who was about to serve the coffee. He said in disbelief, "How did you get pregnant?" "That Gu Jinglian, he forced you." "It's always been women throwing themselves at him. He won't force any woman." "Then that didn't make sense. Gu Jinglian did not force her. And with her personality, she would never stick to Gu Jinglian. That child, where did he come from?" Lin Mu really couldn't understand. In fact, the reason why he was so excited was because of Chu-ho. They had been colleagues for a few years, and they had always kept in touch with each other. He had a good impression of this beautiful but tough girl. Back then, Lin Mu had joined the criminal police because of Chu-ho's recommendation. Therefore, he did have a good impression of Chu-ho. He also had a bit of love for her. It could be said that Vermilion Bird was the goddess in his heart and was irreplaceable. However, back then, when the news of Vermilion Bird's death came, it killed this love. Chapter 2835. Therefore, when Chu-ho said that she was pregnant with Gu Jinglian's child, Lin Mu could not accept it. "Sir, what's going on?" Chu-ho smiled bitterly. "There's no need to look into the past. Now that I've found you, I only hope that you can help me with one thing." "What is it?" Lin Mu patted his chest and said, "Just tell me. As long as you say it, I'll go through fire and water for you." Chu-ho sat up straight and leaned closer to him. He said calmly, "I want a gun." "What?" "I want a pistol, grenades, and some armed equipment. If possible, it's best to give me a night vision device. I need it." "What do you want to do?" Chu-ho raised his eyebrows. "Nothing. My child is now in Gu Jinglian's hands. Naturally, I want to save him." "How can you be so sure that the child is in Gu Jinglian's hands?" Chu-ho said, "When the child went missing, I called the police. The police officer said that the child was taken home by his biological father." "Biological father? Who else could it be other than him? The child must be in his hands. However, I can't meet him face to face and ask him for the child. He will never return the child to me." Lin Mu's expression was a little complicated. He suddenly said, "Sir, since the child is already in the Gu family, then you don't have to bring the child back." "Why?" Chu-ho did not think much of it. He glanced at him in confusion. "Why do you say that? That child? That child? Lin Mu thought for a long time and suddenly clenched his fists. He gathered his courage and said, "Since that child is yours and Gu Jinglian's, do you know Gu Jinglian's identity? He's the leader of the underworld, and you're the anti-underworld inspector. Don't forget your own identity. To you this child is a great humiliation." Shut up. Chu Ho suddenly stood up and leaned forward. He grabbed his collar and said fiercely, "I'm warning you. This is my child, my only family member. He's not the disgrace you're talking about. Do you understand?" "No." Lin Mu's face turned white as he stared at her in fear. "Sir, why are you so fixated on a child? Even if the child was gone, there would be another one. But if you take this child with you, it may not be good for you. You're such an outstanding woman. You should be worthy of an even more outstanding man. As for Gu Jinglian, who was he? He's cruel and numb, vicious and merciless. A child born with such a man. My child does not need anyone to point fingers at him." Chu Ho couldn't take it anymore and interrupted him. "You just need to understand one thing. Now I'm asking you for a gun. Are you going to give it to me or not? I'm looking for you because of our past, and because of our friendship. If you can find a way to get it for me, I will be most grateful. If you don't give it to me, I'll find another way." Lin Mu tightly clenched his teeth and sucked in a breath of cold air. He slowly said, "I'll think of a way for you. I'll give you an answer at 10 p.m. All right, I'll wait for your reply." After he finished speaking, Chu Ho suddenly stood up and was about to leave. When Lin Mu saw this, he hurriedly reached out to grab her hand. However, he seemed to have consciously avoided his touch and walked away. Chapter 2836. In the evening, Lin Mu replied to her text. There was a location attached to the text. The text said that he had already prepared the item she wanted, but because of the special nature of the item, it could only be handed over in a remote area. Chu Ho opened the location. After confirming the location, she replied, "Prepare a few more bullets." After half a minute, Lin Mu sent a puzzled expression. "You're planning on going alone?" I'll go with you." "No need. You being able to help me here is already enough." There was no more news from Lin Mu. The time was set at 10 in the evening. At 9, Chu Ho changed into her normal clothes and set out. When she left the hospital, the sky was already dark. She specially chose a set of dark clothes and tightened her cap before heading to the appointed location. She stopped a taxi and gave the address. The taxi quickly sped off to the destination. After arriving at the location, Chu Ho stood under the street sign and waited. Lin Mu was very punctual and arrived 5 minutes early. He drove a black Audi and parked the car under the street sign. He got out of the car and walked in front of her. He nervously said, "Chu Ho, can you think about it again? Don't go." "Don't go?" Chu Ho raised her eyebrows. She was a little confused. "Chu Ho, if the headquarters receives news that you haven't died and are still alive, as long as you return to the headquarters, with your outstanding military achievements, you will definitely be promoted. Your future is limitless and you are an excellent police officer. If you properly stick to your post, your future will be immeasurable. If the child stays by Gu Jinglian's side, he will be well taken care of. Gu Jinglian is a cruel man, but even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. Since it is his son, he will treat him well. He can't even wait to love him." Chu Ho's face was a little ugly. "Enough. Officer." "I said enough." Chu Ho clenched her fists. Without a doubt, if Lin Mu said another word of advice, she would definitely fight back. "You just need to give the item to me and it's fine." "But?" Lin Mu was still unwilling and bit his lip. Chu Ho lost his patience. He glanced at the trunk and suddenly asked, "The things are in the trunk, right?" "Yes." "Open it." Lin Mu looked at her deeply, then slowly took out his car keys. He pressed the button and the trunk suddenly opened. Chu Ho walked over and looked at the goods in the trunk. There were guns, ammunition, infrared detectors, and even night vision goggles. Everything she wanted, it was all prepared. She had never thought of it, but as a former logistics worker, Lin Mu had thought of it for her. Chu Ho's expression finally relaxed. He picked up a pistol. The heavy weight made her feel extremely at ease. How long had it been since he felt this safe? When she was in the Yenching County Police Station, because of the police system and because she was not an official police officer, she could not be equipped with a gun. The only thing she could carry was a baton. Even if it was a gun, it would at most be an air gun. The heavy weight in her hand gave her a great sense of security. It was familiar but also strange. How long had it been since she touched a gun? Chapter 2837. She was born in a war-torn country. That country was in turmoil and constant wars. Because her family was Chinese in that era, the international community looked down on Asians. Her father's personality was naturally weak. He chose to endure the bullying and oppression. Under such oppression, he struggled at death's door. Therefore, from a young age, she deeply experienced that weakness would only lead to endless bullying and coercion. She originally thought that her life would continue like this. However, until that year, in May, that country was incited by other countries and began to ostracize the H people. In the military riot, her father died under the gun and her mother was stripped naked by the locals. After humiliating her, her hands and feet were handcuffed and she was dragged through the streets in a car. On such a rocky road, a living person was dragged like a beast into a bloody mess. It was too horrible to look at. Until her mother died, she did not see her for the last time. In that riot, the H people died and were injured. But she did not choose to submit. The 7-year-old her chose to resist in the face of adversity. She was dragged into a cellar by a local ruffian. When she was about to be raped, she fiercely bit him and took the iron rod from his waist. She did not know where she got her strength from, but she actually knocked the ruffian unconscious. When she escaped from the cellar, out of instinct, she and a group of people arrived at the dock and boarded the rescue ship to M country. In one night, her family was destroyed and she was homeless. How could she call it a foreign land? When she arrived in M country, she was accepted by a humanitarian organization. Then, she was assigned to a special agent organization for training. The circumstances of her childhood made her deeply understand that weakness would only lead to bullying. Only by being strong could she be respected. Chu-ho collected her thoughts and changed into the clothes that Lin-mu prepared for her. The clothes had a bulletproof layer. Naturally, this layer could not withstand bullets at close range. Military boots that could hide a dagger. Infrared detector. She put the pistol on her waist and took out more than 100 bullets. She separately tied them to her boots and waist belt. Then she put away the equipment one by one and closed the trunk. Lin-mu hurried forward. Chu-ho, you really don't want to reconsider? Does the headquarters know that I'm still alive? Chu-ho suddenly asked. Lin-mu was startled and quickly shook his head. It was too rushed. I didn't have time to report. No need to report. Chu-ho casually wiped the gun with a cloth and lightly said, Vermilion Bird is already dead. The current me, I have my own name. Why? Lin-mu was in disbelief. The name Vermilion Bird is synonymous with supreme glory. You used to value the glory. How can you say that you want to give up the name Vermilion Bird so? The glory that you once regarded, you don't care? Chu-ho's hand movements suddenly froze. Chapter 2838. Whether it's fame or fortune, it's all in the past. Chu-ho suddenly interrupted him. Lin-mu was startled. Chu-ho calmly said, I'm just tired and want to rest. Although I'm not old enough to retire yet, I've seen a lot of bullets since I was young. I've never imagined that I could have a peaceful life. But Lin-mu, do you know? In these 5 years I've lost all my memories, but I've lived a carefree life, a happy life. I have a sensible and well-behaved son. In these 5 years I've never dreamed that I could be like an ordinary person, waking up every morning quietly eating breakfast and then going to work. When I get home, I have a well-behaved son. After dinner, I'll hold his little hand and go for a walk in the fields. As Chu-ho spoke, he actually laughed softly. Although there are many things that aren't satisfactory, compared to my previous life of being a police officer, it's much more blissful. In the past, I didn't even dare to dream that I would have my own family, my own child. Do you know? I named him Xiao Bao. There's no special meaning behind it. When he was born, his face was wrinkled and thin, but I felt that life was a miracle. When he grew up, he was chubby, white, and tender. I thought of many names, but in the end, I still called him Xiao Bao because he was my baby. Lin-mu silently listened. Chu-ho continued, I really like that kind of life. If I could, I'd rather live as Chu-ho instead of using the name Vermilion Bird. Sir. Chu-ho turned around and glanced at him. He suddenly smiled. This kind of feeling, the current you can't understand. It's getting late. Chu Ho looked at the sky and curled his lips. Send me to the Gu family's main residence. I want to see him as soon as possible. Lin Mu finally gave up. The two of them got in the car and Lin Mu started the car. He took a deep breath and stepped on the accelerator. Gu family's residence. Xiao Bao was coaxed to sleep. For the past few days, Gu Jinglian had arranged for him to rest in his bedroom. After these few days of getting along with each other, Xiao Bao Chu had also eliminated the estrangement between them and made up with him. He was finally willing to show him an innocent smile, no longer like before. When he was in front of him, he was arrogant and looked down on him. Even now he still called him uncle. Uncle. Gu Jinglian did not rush him. He felt that it would be better to wait until the child adapted to the environment and let nature take its course. Adults get used to it faster than children. Gu Jinglian quickly adapted to his role as a new father. Gradually, he realized that he was a newbie stay-at-home dad. At the very least, when facing Xiao Bao, the sharpness on his body would always be subtly restrained. Although there were many times when Xiao Bao would be mischievous by his side when he was busy with work, it would also make him unhappy. He would also be angry at him, glare at him, yell at him, but no matter how annoyed he was, he could not bear to touch him. It was like a lion roaring at a mischievous cub. Although he was glaring at him, he would not really slap him. Chapter 28:39. Therefore, no matter how fiercely he glared at him, the little guy did not seem to have any awareness. He even climbed onto his body provocatively, making funny faces at him and sticking out his tongue. Gu Jinglian was always amused by his funny little expression. Uncle said that mommy will come to find me soon, but I've been waiting for a long time. Don't tell me that she still hasn't found me by the time Xiao Bao's hair turns white? Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. He was slightly displeased that the little guy mentioned that woman again. A certain man was jealous. He snorted coldly and suddenly threw out a historical question. Do you like mommy more or uncle more? Of course it's mommy. Before he could finish his sentence, Gu Jinglian heard the word mommy, and his face suddenly sank to the bottom. Chu Xiaobao saw that his expression was not right and immediately changed the topic. His eyes darted around and then he said with a smile, of course it's Uncle Moore. Good boy. The man was satisfied and reached out to gently ruffle his hair. But Xiaobao really misses mommy. Chu Xiaobao muttered. Is mommy playing hide and seek with me? She's deliberately hiding in a corner and deliberately not coming to find Xiaobao. She doesn't want you anymore. Gu Jinglian deliberately scared him. When Chu Xiaobao heard this, his face was full of disbelief. That's impossible. Mommy won't abandon me. Oh? Are you so sure? Gu Jinglian seemed to be very keen on provoking their mother-son relationship. He snorted coldly. If she doesn't abandon you, then why hasn't she come to find you for so long? It's probably because she hates Uncle. Baby Chu blurted out of the blue. Gu Jinglian's face darkened. What do you mean? In the past, when Xiao Bao saw that other children had fathers, Xiao Bao was very puzzled. Why do they all have fathers but I don't? Chu Xiaobao said and even showed a puzzled expression. After a pause he continued. Later Xiaobao asked mommy why Xiaobao didn't have a father. Gu Jinglian could not help but be interested and said, what did she say? Xiaobao looked at his expression carefully and then blurted out. Mommy said that daddy died early. What? Daddy died early? Gu Jinglian seemed to have been struck by lightning and his face was charred black. She said that I died early. Yeah, that's what he said. He said something about the grass on his grave being taller than me. Gu Jinglian's fists. This woman actually dared to use such despicable words to fool the child. He died early. Xiao Bao did not care at all. His words and actions were undoubtedly betraying his mother. He continued to complain. I only asked how daddy died. Gu Jinglian looked at him questioningly again. What did your mommy say? Xiao Bao said plausibly. Mommy said that daddy was hit by a car when he went out. Gu Jinglian was speechless. Hit by a car when he went out? How could she come up with such a ridiculous story? He slammed the table. Bullsh *T. Xiao Bao was frightened by Gu Jinglian's foul language. He shrank back and looked up to see that Gu Jinglian's originally exquisite and handsome face was now extremely gloomy. He suddenly realized that he had said something wrong. Uncle, don't be angry. Chapter 2840. When Chu Xiaobao heard this, he did not buy it on the spot. No way. If you dare to chop mommy into pieces, I'll. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he asked provocatively, You'll what? I'll. When Chu Xiaobao saw the murderous look in Gu Jinglian's eyes, he was instantly terrified. He gulped and said timidly, I'll settle this with you when I grow up. Humph. At least you know what's good for you. He even knew that he was so small that even if they were arm wrestling, he would be flattened and rounded with just one finger. Gu Jinglian ravaged his little face heavily. At that moment, Uncle Fu pushed open the door and walked in. When he saw that Xiaobao was still in Gu Jinglian's arms, he immediately walked over and hugged him. Xiaobao, it's getting late. It's time to rest. No. Xiaobao's face fell immediately. He pulled a long face sullenly. The mention of sleep seemed to kill him. He nestled in Gu Jinglian's arms and stretched out his arms and legs, looking extremely comfortable. While Gu Jinglian was busy flipping through the dossiers, he would hang on to him like a little hamster and munch on snacks non-stop while watching the hottest fantasy dramas. Destiny Chronicles. He liked the beautiful young lady in the drama, so he was very happy watching it. His eyes stared fixedly at the picturesque person on the screen without blinking. When he heard that he was going to sleep, the little guy felt uncomfortable all over. You don't want to sleep. It's still early. Uncle Fu glared at him. It's still early? It's already past 10 o'clock. It's time to sleep early. You'll only grow taller if you sleep early. Uncle Fu used the same words that he used to trick other children to lure him. However, Xiaobao did not fall for it. He continued to pester and fool around in Gu Jinglian's arms, unwilling to sleep. Uncle Fu looked at this scene and for some reason he was on tenterhooks. It seemed that in his memory, other than the cat that Gu Jinglian had raised a few years ago, no other creature had dared to be so lawless and reckless in his arms. Gu Jinglian's attitude towards Chu Xiaobao had been quite gentle these days. It was probably because there had been nothing annoying in the past few days, and there had been no trouble in the business. This was because Gu Jinglian was rather patient in dealing with his unbridled nonsense. However, with Gu Jinglian's indulgence, Xiaobao seemed to be a little arrogant. Gu Jinglian treated him well, probably because his fatherly instincts had finally been awakened. As for this little guy, Gu Jinglian looked left and right and found him pleasing to the eye. Let him watch for a while longer, Gu Jinglian said. When Fubo heard this, he pondered for a while before he mustered up his courage and said, Master, you can't just let a child do whatever he wants and spoil him like this. You can't spoil him like this. Who's spoiling him? Gu Jinglian snorted arrogantly. It doesn't matter if he sleeps a little later. Uncle Fu immediately explained. The younger the child, the more he should get a good night's sleep. Otherwise, not only will he not grow taller, but his physical fitness will also deteriorate very quickly. Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes slightly. Oh? Is there such a saying? Uncle Fu nodded heavily. Gu Jinglian then said, Then hurry up and take him to bed. Chapter 2841. Let me look at it for a while more. I want to see that pretty lady. Go to sleep. Gu Jinglian pulled a long face. Xiaobao Chu finally knew how to behave. He did not dare to make a sound and allowed Uncle Fu to carry him to sleep. Gu Jinglian sat quietly in the study and quietly flipped through the documents. Until now, the Gu family still kept accounts in the form of written books. In modern times they were called financial statements. However, they continued the ancient tradition. Whether it was the casino or other special transactions, they were mainly recorded in this way. Gu Jinglian had learned how to keep accounts since he was young. Therefore, his calligraphy was very beautiful. He quietly read the documents until 2 o'clock in the morning. The night was dark, but the wind was still, and the clouds were gradually fading. After Chu Ho disguised herself, she entered the Gu family's back door through the secret underground passage. There was a secret passage in the Gu family's house with hidden mechanisms. This was the fastest way for insiders to enter the house from the outside world. Of course, the mechanism was set up very carefully. Those who were not from the Gu family did not know about these secret passages. Most people entered from the main entrance, but the entrance was heavily guarded. No matter how well you disguised yourself, They could tell at a glance whether you were an outsider or a member of the Gu family. Chu-ho naturally would not choose the main entrance. It was just that the secret passage had many password locks. She remembered the password locks. However, those passwords were from the Gu family a few years ago. She did not know if the Gu family had changed them in the past few years. Based on her understanding of Gu Jinglian, the password locks must be changed regularly. The passwords she remembered were probably already invalid. However, even if she did not remember, it did not matter. After all, she was from the intelligence department and had excellent investigative skills. Although the password locks of the Gu family were complicated, she could easily crack them if she was given time. Chu-ho went to the mechanical lock and studied it. The password had indeed been changed. She pondered for a while. This password lock was not very difficult and she could easily crack it. However, when he reached the second gate, the password for the second mechanism lock seemed to be very difficult to decipher. In order to crack this password, Chu-ho spent more than half an hour. By the time the password was cracked, she was already drenched in cold sweat. If the password was entered incorrectly, the signal would be connected to the logistics of the Gu family. When the time came, the door would open, and she would be greeted by more than 100 elites from the Gu clan. Chu-ho fumbled his way into the Gu family's main residence through a secret passage. After exiting the secret passage, it was the backyard of the Gu family. The backyard was a few courtyards away from Gu Jinglian's house. Chu-ho looked up. What she saw was a rockery, flowing water and pavilions. These were the best cover. It could be seen that many things in the back garden had been renovated in the past few years. Before this, she remembered that the back garden was filled with large patches of begonia flowers, but now the begonia flowers no longer existed. Green bamboo, pine trees, pear blossoms, and roses. There was no trace of the begonia flowers in the garden. She used to love the begonia flowers in the garden the most. Every time the spring breeze blew, the flowers would be as pink as peaches, and the bouquets of begonia flowers would bloom proudly. At a glance, they were extremely beautiful and shocking. She did not have any preference for flowers. The only thing she liked was the begonia flowers. Chapter 2842. Who's there? Suddenly, a man's cold voice came from behind her. Chu-ho stopped in her tracks. Her back stiffened for a moment before she suddenly turned around. A man stood behind her, looking at her back suspiciously. He felt that this woman was too unfamiliar. There weren't many women in the Gu family. There weren't many women in the business to begin with, and those who could enter the main family could be counted on one hand. Therefore, it was easy for an unfamiliar woman to suddenly barge into the Gu family's main residence to attract attention. Chu-ho glanced at him from the corner of her eyes and said casually, "What's the matter? What's your name?" The man asked again, "Why haven't I seen you in the main residence before?" "It's natural that you haven't seen me before. Because I've always been by old master's side. It's natural that you don't know me." "Is that so?" The man was still suspicious. Recently, Gu Jinglian's attitude towards women had been indifferent. It was probably because he had too many things to worry about in the Gu family in the past few months. He couldn't be distracted at all, nor did he have the heart to be distracted. Could it be someone from the main family? Impossible. As long as it was someone from the main family, even if he wasn't familiar with them, he should have seen them before. But he had never seen this woman before. Chu-ho saw that he was extremely vigilant, so she sighed helplessly and said, "It's fine if you suspect me, but there are some things that I need you to pass to him on my behalf, okay?" "What things?" Chu-ho looked around vigilantly and sighed. "Why don't you come over and take it? This thing is easy to break." The man was completely curious. He didn't know what exactly it was. It wasn't that he didn't suspect that this fellow would play some tricks. However, he thought that this was the main residence of the Gu family. Who would have the ability to cause trouble in the Gu family's territory? With such a fearless thought, the man approached her. Chu-ho put her hand into her pocket. Just as the man straightened his neck and looked over to size her up, unexpectedly, Chu-ho suddenly took out a dagger from her pocket. She turned her head abruptly and aimed the sharp end of the dagger at the man's heart, almost stabbing it ruthlessly into his chest. Puff! Blood gushed out. The man subconsciously opened his mouth and wanted to scream, but Chu-ho took a step forward and covered his mouth, then viciously dislocated his neck. The man's head tilted to the side, and he immediately fainted. However, with such injuries he would not wake up for a while. He would not die from excessive blood loss until someone found out that he had done it for her. Chuho set a time limit for herself. She would throw this man in a corner. When he was discovered and caused a commotion, if she still hadn't found the person she was looking for, she wouldn't stay any longer and would take advantage of the chaos to leave. Chuho fumbled his way into Gu Jinglian's house. As the main courtyard of the main residence, Gu Jinglian's style was evident everywhere. At first glance, the design of the house was very cold. Just like Gu Jinglian, it was gloomy and cold, but also arrogant and unreasonable. Against the moonlight, the lake water was desolate and bleak. Green bamboo and green pine were his favorite plants. After so many years, they had not changed. When she reached the steps, Chuho walked up the steps and entered the house. She vaguely identified the direction and slowly felt her way towards Gu Jinglian's bedroom. She suspected that Xiao Bao would probably be arranged to rest in his bedroom. She glanced at the time. Chapter 2843. At this time, that man was probably still in the study. He always slept very late and would only get out of bed at around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. However, he would wake up as soon as the sun rose. He would be busy the entire morning and sleep for another 3 hours during his lunch break. This was an opportunity. If she wasn't wrong, Xiao Bao was probably sleeping soundly on his bed at this moment. Chuho leaned closer to the door and carefully listened to the sounds in the room. She could faintly hear the sound of snoring. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. It was the kind of snoring that belonged to a child. This kind of snoring sound was very familiar to Chuho. Xiao Bao. It was Xiao Bao. He was in this room. Chuho was so emotional that her eyes turned red. She suddenly grabbed the door handle and twisted it gently. The room wasn't locked. She entered the room smoothly and silently locked the door. The room was very big. It was the master bedroom, a Chinese-style courtyard suite. The entire Gu residence was built in the Chinese style. Even the rooms were in the classic Chinese style. Chuho looked around. The furnishings in the room were slightly different from what she remembered. Indeed, the changes that 5 years brought to a person were incomparably huge. She passed through the arched door and slowly walked to the master bedroom. On the big bed, Xiao Bao's limbs were spread out. He was sleeping soundly. The weather had been a little cold for the past 2 days, and he had the habit of kicking off his blanket in the middle of the night. Probably because he had caught a slight cold. When he was sleeping soundly, snot bubbles were coming out of his small nostrils. Chu-hee, who was originally tense from head to toe due to her vigilance, could not help but burst into laughter at this scene. This guy. How could he sleep so peacefully? When she thought of this, she felt a little unbalanced in her heart. In order to find him, she had been obsessed with recovering as soon as possible. Now that she had taken great risks to sneak into the Gu residence, she didn't know that this little guy was sleeping peacefully here. However, the only thing that comforted her was that at least she could confirm that this stubborn little fellow had not suffered much in the Gu family. She had originally thought that this little guy was noisy. If he made Gu Jinglian uncomfortable, he would definitely not be polite to him. She did not expect that with Gu Jinglian's personality, he would be able to tolerate this fellow. She must have caused a huge ruckus at the Gu residence these past few days. This Gu Jinglian also did not deport him? Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She walked over and patted his chubby little face. With a muffled groan, she lowered her voice and said, "Xiao Bao." Woo! Chu Xiao Bao was immersed in his beautiful dream. Being disturbed at this moment, he narrowed his eyes and immediately reached out to slap her hand, muttering, "Don't be noisy. La. Stinking Xiao Bao." Chuho was a little angry. He couldn't help but flick his face in an attempt to wake him up. It seemed that waking him up was too rough, and she felt a little sorry for him. Although Xiao Bao was only 5 years old, he already had a serious temper when he woke up. When she accidentally woke him up in the middle of the night, he would sit up in bed with a dirty face. Then, he would have an expression of wanting to cry but no tears would come out. First, he would throw the pillow in frustration. Then he would cry out in dissatisfaction, as if he was venting his displeasure from being woken up. Chapter 2844. She pinched his cheeks again and was about to reach out to hug him when he suddenly stopped her. Behind her, An ice-cold body stuck close to her. Chu-ho's expression instantly stiffened. She was shocked and was about to turn around when she felt a cold and hard object pressing against her back. Based on her many years of experience, she immediately realized that this hard object was no other than a gun. She could even easily sense the cold air coming from the muzzle of the gun. Who was it? Chu-ho broke out in a cold sweat. There was no other reason. When she entered the room, there was no one else in the room except for Xiao Bao, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. She had locked the door just now. Even if the person could unlock it from the outside, wouldn't it make some noise? However, this person not only did not make any noise, but she also did not notice when he was standing behind her. Her vigilance was very high, and her facial features were very sensitive, but when this man stood behind her, she did not notice at all. Chu-ho did not dare to move, for fear that the man behind her would pull the trigger if she moved. She could not figure out this man's identity. Perhaps it was because she was too nervous that she lost the ability to make the first judgment when it came to strangers. However, after a moment of calmness, she suddenly smelled a faint fragrance. The fragrance of orchids? It was a somewhat familiar fragrance. Just as she was trying to figure out this man's identity, Gu Jinglian's cold voice sounded above her head. I thought you wouldn't come. Chu-ho's body suddenly trembled. This voice had been her curse for countless nights. Even in the 5 years when she lost her memory, she could always hear this voice in her dreams whenever she had trouble sleeping. It was like a demon bewitching her heart. It was him. Gu Jinglian. Chu-he sucked in a breath of cold air and her back stiffened. It's you? Why can't it be me? Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and snorted. This is my room. No one has the right to set foot here except me. Chu-ho gritted his teeth. I clearly locked the door. If you came in, why didn't you make any noise? Because from the beginning to the end, I have been in this room and have never left. What? Gu Jinglian smirked coldly. I knew you'd come. Chu-ho's judgment of him had probably always been his biggest mistake. This man had always been the most unpredictable one. When she was still an anti-mafia inspector, she had been ordered to stay by his side. As a spy, she had indeed stolen a lot of unfavorable evidence from him and submitted it to the headquarters. However, it was only later that she realized that the information she had secretly smuggled back to the headquarters was just a rarity to him. Those pieces of evidence were not enough to accuse him of a crime. She suddenly realized that perhaps from a long time ago, he had already sensed her disloyalty and started to suspect her background and identity. As for the so-called evidence, it was nothing more than playing hard to get. It was to test her and find out more about her background. Chapter 2845. When Chu-ho woke up again, she felt a chill all over her body. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked around, only to find that she was in a cold and damp cellar. Although it was called a cellar, it was more accurate to say that this was the Gu family's underground prison. It was specially used to imprison those traitors who had betrayed the Gu family. There were many torture devices in the prison. When Chu-ho first entered the Gu family, she was lucky enough to see the torture devices of the Gu family. She did not know how cruel the torture methods of the Manchurian period were. She only saw with her own eyes that these ancient torture devices of the Gu family were enough to force even a tight-lipped person to give up here, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. Chu-ho subconsciously wanted to stand up, but just as she stood up, her ankle was dragged back by a force. She was caught off guard and almost fell forward to the ground. When she turned around to look, she was shocked to find that her 4 limbs were tightly shackled by chains. Her wrists were suspended high in the air by the chains. Her ankles were also tightly wrapped by the chains. Damn it! Chu-ho bit her lips tightly and stared at the bruises on her hands caused by the chains. The muscles on her face tightened. I said long ago that the Gu family is not a place where you can come and go as you please. Not far away, Gu Jinglian's evil voice sounded again. Chu-ho raised her head and stared in the direction of the voice with a pair of red eyes. She saw him sitting elegantly on the chair with the official's hat. His legs were elegantly crossed, and one of his hands was casually fiddling with the jade ring on his finger. His leisurely appearance was inexplicably compatible with the gloomy and cold cellar at this moment. Chu-ho had never been afraid of anyone, except for Gu Jinglian. There was a kind of aura on him that made people feel intimidated. Even if he did not do anything or say anything, just sitting there, his entire body exuded a hair-raising aura. Especially the coldness that flashed by the corners of his almond-shaped eyes. It was really frightening. If Gu Jinglian was to be described as an animal, it must be a cold-blooded creature like a snake. Just his gaze alone would make anyone feel as if there was a cold snake coiled around their shoulders. The pair of snake eyes would expand as it stared at them covetously. The snake's body coiled tighter and tighter, enough to give people the illusion of suffocation. At this moment, Gu Jinglian's eyes fell on her body. Chu Ho's breath gradually rose and fell violently, unable to calm down. "What do you want?" Chu Ho asked through gritted teeth. "How dare you barge into the Gu residence alone?" The corners of Gu Jinglian's lips curled up coldly as he slowly retorted. "I'm the one who should be asking you what you want. My goal is very clear." Chu Ho did not beat around the bush and simply negotiated with him. He said word by word, "I'm here to bring Xiao Bao away. Xiao Bao is my son." Gu Jinglian calmly revealed the truth. Chu Ho was stunned, then sneered coldly. "This is my son. My blood flows in his body. Similarly, my blood flows in his body too." After Gu Jinglian finished speaking, his brows furrowed slightly, as if he was a little conflicted. "We seem to have a dispute over custody rights? Listen, I can let you go, but I have a condition." Chapter 2846. Gu Jinglian slowly got up, walked to Chu Ho's side and knelt down on one knee. Chu Ho couldn't help but be attracted by a piece of paper in his hand. She didn't know when, but there was an agreement in his hand. He spread the agreement on the ground and slowly pushed it in front of her. He said meaningfully, "Sign this agreement and I'll let you go." "What is this?" Chu Ho was bewildered. How could this man be so kind as to let her go? What was this so-called agreement about? She didn't even have to think about it. Probably wasn't a good agreement. Gu Jinglian saw that she was sizing him up. His lips curled up coldly, and he said almost cruelly, "I've already drafted this agreement, but I still need you to sign it for it to be valid." "What exactly is this agreement?" Chu Ho looked him straight in the eye. "If you sign it, the agreement about you giving up Xiao Bao's custody rights will officially take effect." As Gu Jinglian spoke, he gently pushed the Indonesian agreement that his subordinate had presented to her. "It's not enough to just sign it. You also need to put your fingerprint on it." "Gu Jinglian." Chu Ho gritted her teeth and roared. "Don't even think about it. Xiao Bao is my son. Don't even think about taking him away from me." "You're not willing?" Gu Jinglian's voice suddenly turned cold. His gaze was no longer as gentle as before. A few cold rays burst from the corners of his eyes, and there was a hint of threat. "I won't sign this agreement," Chu Ho said resolutely. "He's my flesh and blood. You're giving me this lousy piece of paper and using my freedom to threaten me to give up Xiao Bao's custody rights? Don't you think it's ridiculous? Dream on." "Tsk." Gu Jinglian was a little annoyed by her yelling. He frowned coldly and sized her up a few times. He lamented, "Red Lotus, compared to 5 years ago, you don't seem to have changed at all." "How haven't I changed?" "Still so stubborn." Gu Jinglian slowly stood up and looked at her condescendingly. He suddenly bent down and grabbed her chin. His slender fingers squeezed her face tightly. "What right do you have to go against me now? If you know what's good for you, then sign this agreement obediently. For the sake of the child, I will let bygones be bygones." "Let bygones be bygones." Chu Ho sucked in a few breaths of cold air, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He wanted to laugh, but there was a lump in his throat. "Gu Jinglian, isn't it enough that you've ruined my life? I will never allow you to ruin Xiao Bao's life again." "I ruined your life." Gu Jinglian looked at him expressionlessly. "Red Lotus, you're the one who ruined your life, not me. If you want me to give up Xiao Bao's custody rights and hand him over to you." Chu Ho's chest heaved up and down for a while. He suddenly said through gritted teeth, "I'd rather kill him with my own hands when he was still in my womb than let him fall into your hands." Gu Jinglian's cold eyes shrank violently. Suddenly, the corners of his lips twitched. The curve was neither deep nor shallow, but it was obvious that he was really angry. "You have a lot of backbone." He paused and looked around. Then, his gaze fell on the torture equipment at the side. He sneered and said, "I'd like to see how long your backbone can last." Chapter 2847. After leaving these cold words, Gu Jinglian swaggered off, leaving Chu Ho alone in the cellar. She was chained up in the cold, hopeless, and dark. Gu Jinglian left this order only if she was willing to relent and sign the agreement. Chu Ho soon heard the sound of metal clashing. She turned her head and saw a few tall men coming towards her. These men were all trained by Gu Jinglian. Not to mention that they had inherited Gu Jinglian's ruthlessness, they would definitely not show her any mercy. Pa! A sound was heard. A long whip hit her back hard. He let out a muffled groan. The sudden pain almost made her lose consciousness for a few seconds. The man wielding the whip had quite a bit of strength in his hand. The whip landed heavily on her back, leaving behind a deep bloody mark. Soon a long tear appeared on the thin material of his clothes. The skin that was stained with blood was soon exposed to the air. The man was not in a hurry to whip her a second time. Instead, he took a basin of water from the side and poured it over her back. Walala! Ah! Chu Ho could not help but cry out in pain. Immediately after, she gritted her teeth fiercely, but her whole body started to twitch uncontrollably. What was this? Was this salt water? The brand new wound that was caused by the whip was suddenly soaked in salt water. This kind of pain made her mind blank. Chu Ho gritted her teeth. She gritted her teeth and her gaze fell on the agreement spread out in front of her. It was already wet with salt water. Xiao Bao's innocent smile could not help but appear in front of her eyes. Her heart suddenly tightened. Slap! Another lash landed heavily on her back. Chu Ho groaned in pain. Even the muscles on her face could not help but twitch. This kind of pain, even if she gritted her teeth, was not something that could be easily overcome with a few words. What was even more difficult to describe was the feeling of being a prisoner. Gu Jinglian. This vicious and merciless man. She had never thought that this man would use such a cruel method to try and take Xiao Bao away from her. Impossible. She would never let go. It was even more impossible for him to sign such a humiliating contract. Pa! Chu Ho finally couldn't hold it in any longer. He cried out in pain, his voice hoarse. Perhaps it was because she had just undergone a major surgery and was anxious to find Xiao Bao, so she tried her best to recover. In fact, she had not fully recovered. At this moment, with her old illness and new injuries, she fainted from the pain. Chu Ho's vision went black. His body leaned forward and fell face first onto the ground. Fainted. The man with the whip was surprised. Don't tell me he died from the collision? Another person stepped forward and kicked her a few times, but there was no reaction. It had only been 3 lashes, but he had already fainted. When he saw that this woman's mouth was so tough, he wondered how capable she was. However, this was also within reason. Don't underestimate these 3 lashes. A normal person would not be able to survive even 1 lash. However, she had endured 3 lashes. This was already not simple. Moreover, he had used a lot of strength and did not hold back. She would definitely not be able to withstand it. The man directly took a basin of salt water, grabbed her hair and splashed it on her head. Chapter 2848. Chu Ho opened her eyes, which were bloodshot. Pain. So painful, because of the great pain, her eyeballs couldn't move very well. Are you going to sign it or not? The person beside her waved the whip in front of her. It seemed to be a threat, but it also seemed to be a threat. It was as if she said no, the whip would come at her again in the next second. However, Chu He's lips quivered. She did not nod obediently and beg for mercy like a pug as he wished. Instead, she spat out 2 words coldly. Don't even think about it. Ha! The person sneered and flicked the tail of the whip. It landed on the ground with a paw sound, which echoed continuously. Woman, you're really stubborn. Boss has instructed that tonight, we'll stop until you sign. Why do you want to die? If you can't even take these 3 lashes, how are you going to deal with the rest? Chu Ho glanced at him from the corner of her eyes and retorted sarcastically. You want to kill me or cut me up, don't you think? Either I die or I take the child away. There's no third option. Are you really not afraid of death? The man was so angry that his face turned ashen. Before his master left, He had specifically instructed that she must sign it. His task was to force this woman to sign the agreement. If he couldn't complete his task, then the next person to be punished would be him. This woman was so stubborn. He was afraid that even if he whipped her again and again, there wouldn't be any changes. He couldn't possibly kill her, right? His master had also instructed him to keep her alive. If he killed her like this, wouldn't his master skin him and pull out his tendons? Thinking of this, the man couldn't keep up his airs. He couldn't predict whether this woman would die after a few more lashes. It had to be said that a person's life was very fragile at times. It was often a matter of a single thought. Hence, the man summoned his underling and asked him to quickly report the situation. The subordinate was also a quick-witted person. Seeing that Chu Ho was on the verge of death and on the verge of collapse, he was afraid that he could not hold on any longer and hurriedly ran into the study. Gu Jinglian was reading a book when his subordinate rushed into the study and said anxiously, "Master, that woman refused to sign and was whipped 3 times. She looks very weak. I'm afraid she can't take it anymore. If this continues, you'll definitely be beaten to death." "Oh," Gu Jinglian frowned. "She still refuses to sign?" "Yes." The lackey nodded vigorously. "She fainted after being whipped 3 times. We went up to take a look and found that the bandage on her head was removed. It was a surgical scar, and the stitches hadn't been removed yet. From the looks of it, she had just undergone surgery and had yet to recover. These 3 whips had been ruthlessly lashed out. If this continued and she still refused to sign, she would be useless. If this goes on, someone will die." Gu Jinglian clenched his fists in anger. "She's really stubborn. I'm afraid it's because of her maternal instincts." The lackey sighed. "After all, asking a mother to give up her child's custody is crueler than any torture. Are you speaking up for her?" Gu Jinglian glanced at him suspiciously. He immediately defended himself. "It's no use. It's just that I feel that this girl is quite pitiful. She's a little stubborn, but it's hard to dislike her." Chapter 2849. "Yes." The underling lowered his head in grievance. Observing his expression, he carefully probed. Then, "Master, do you think we should continue?" Just as Gu Jinglian was hesitating, Chu Xiaobao's cries suddenly came from the master bedroom. He suddenly got up and walked into the bedroom with a guarded expression. When he turned on the wall lamp, he saw that Xiaobao had woken up from his dream. He sat on the bed, hugging the blanket and sobbing pitifully. He must have dreamed of something scary, so when he woke up, he was so scared that he wailed loudly. He used the blanket to wipe his tears as he sobbed. Gu Jinglian walked over and sat on the side of the bed. He asked in a low voice, "Why are you crying?" "Xiaobao. Xiaobao dreamed of Mommy." Chu Xiaobao rubbed his wet eyes and sobbed. "Xiaobao dreamed that Mommy was standing by the bed and touching my face. But I don't know what happened, but in the blink of an eye she disappeared. I chased after her and realized that she was walking away without looking back. No matter how I called her, she didn't seem to hear me. She didn't even turn around to look at me." Speaking of the pain, Chu Xiaobao cried even more pitifully. "I chased after her with all my might, but it felt like the road was so long that I couldn't catch up. She didn't even look back and walked further and further away. When I opened my eyes, I realized that I was back on the bed. Does Mommy not want me anymore? Does she not want me anymore?" Gu Jinglian frowned. What was that saying again? It was called, "Mother and son are connected by heart." In the past, he had thought that this saying sounded too pretentious. But now he had seen it for himself. Mother and son were connected by heart. It was really strange. He immediately opened his mouth and said something that wasn't really coaxing. His tone was still gentle. "You're dreaming, Uncle." Chu Xiaobao immediately cried out. A huge sense of unease engulfed him. "Will Mommy really not want me anymore? If she doesn't want you, then she doesn't want you." Gu Jinglian immediately expressed his stance. "Uncle wants you." "Oh, no." Chu Xiaobao cried even harder. "Mommy, you can't abandon me. Why do you keep saying Mom? Can't you follow Uncle?" Gu Jinglian was a little unhappy. This was a terrible feeling. He didn't realize that he cared a lot about what the child thought of him. However, it was obvious that in Xiaobao's heart, Chu Ho's position was more important. Naturally, he was dissatisfied. Chu Xiaobao muttered, "You're not my father." He opened his mouth, but the words "I'm your father" didn't come out. Due to his pride, it was impossible for him to admit defeat to a child. Thus he changed the topic and asked, "How am I not? Mom didn't say you were." Chu Xiaobao acted like a mommy's boy. "If mommy says you are, then you are. If mommy says you aren't, then you aren't." Gu Jinglian was so angry that his face darkened. This child was only 5 years old, but he was already so biased towards that woman. How could this be? However, he didn't think about it in another way. Since this child was born, he and Chu Ho had depended on each other. If he didn't stick to Chu Ho, who else could he stick to? This nominal father of his had left a very bad impression in his heart at first. It couldn't be helped that the child didn't want to get close to him. But who was Gu Jinglian? Chapter 2850. Chu Xiaobao was crying for his mother, and even Uncle Fu couldn't coax him. Gu Jinglian couldn't take it anymore and shouted, "Don't cry. If you cry again, you won't be able to see her again." Chu Xiaobao sobbed and asked innocently, "If I don't cry, can I see my mother?" "As long as you don't cry." Chu Xiaobao immediately nodded. "Okay, Xiaobao won't cry." It was a promise. Gu Jinglian walked out of the bedroom and immediately ordered, "Go and clean that woman up." Uncle Fu was confused when he heard this. He had just heard that an audacious woman had barged into the Gu residence. Old Master had sent this woman to the cellar. He had heard that this woman was Xiaobao's biological mother, but he hadn't had the time to find out the whole story. "The woman you're talking about, could it be that you're referring to the woman you locked in the cellar?" "Yes," Gu Jinglian said with disgust. "Xiaobao is crying for his mother. Go and clean her up. Don't get her covered in blood." "Yes, I got it." Uncle Fu trembled in fear as he responded. He watched as Gu Jinglian left the room. He didn't know where he was going. Naturally, he didn't dare to ask about his whereabouts. On the way to the cellar, Uncle Fu's imagination ran wild. He wondered what kind of woman could be pregnant with Old Master's child. It should be a beautiful woman, right? Old Master kept a close eye on women. The contraceptive measures were well taken, and such things would never happen. Old Master had a bad temper, and he didn't have much patience for women. This character wasn't born this way, but had been cultivated in the Gu family since he was young. The violent environment had instilled in him an extremely sinister and perverse character. However, Uncle Fu knew that Old Master's nature wasn't bad, but he had always been the one to call the wind and summon the rain. He was used to being spoiled. If he wanted the moon in the sky, no one would dare to pluck the stars for him. Just like that, he became a man of his word. His personality was very cold, or perhaps he had a soft side, but he was stingy with his words. He would never allow himself to show too much tenderness. Firstly, it was because of his identity. He was the supreme leader of the Gu clan. As the head of the Gu clan, he had to conform to the image of this identity. Secondly, there were many pairs of eyes in the Gu family watching them closely. Just like the leader of a pride, only by becoming the most ruthless could he be respected by everyone. However, he was still a mortal after all. In the end, he revealed his soft-hearted side. When he walked to the cellar, the few people guarding Chu Ho saw that he had arrived. It was as if they had been granted amnesty. "Uncle Fu, you're here. What did Master say? How are they?" Uncle Fu asked first. "Uncle Fu, why don't you take a look first? Just now he fainted again. We don't know what to do." Master said to bring him back to his room first. As Uncle Fu spoke, he walked to Chu Ho's side and lowered his body to look at her. "This person can't be dead, right?" Uncle Fu was a little worried. He saw that she was covered in wounds. Her hair was messy and covered her face. There was a pool of salt water under her body. There were 3 whip marks on her back. They were very eye-catching and her flesh was badly mutilated. This was a girl. Why was she so heavy-handed? She's still breathing, but I was a little too heavy-handed just now. I don't know. As he spoke, Uncle Fu had already flipped her over. It didn't matter if she didn't flip over.